The mahogany desk had been in the Morgan family for 4 generations. Elena traced the water ring near its edge. Her grandfather's whiskey glass, left too long during the '87 crash. He'd saved the company then. Her father was about to lose it now. $50 million. Richard Morgan's voice cracked on the number. He stood at the window of his Brooklyn Heights study, silhouette sharp against the Manhattan skyline. That's what we need to survive the quarter. The creditors won't wait past Friday. Elena's chest tightened. The Singapore contract fell through. Chin pulled out yesterday. He turned and she barely recognized him. Her father had always been solid certain. The man before her looked hollowed out. I mortgaged everything. The house, the boats, my life insurance. It's not enough. She stood, legs unsteady. Then we file Chapter 11. Restructure. There's another option. He crossed to the desk, withdrew a manila folder. His hands shook as he set it before her. Damien Cross has made an offer. The name landed like a fist. Everyone in New York knew Damien Cross, the hedge fund CEO who'd built Cross Capital from nothing, who dismantled companies for sport, who collected art and enemies with equal precision. Forbes called him a visionary. The Wall Street Journal called him a vulture. Elena called him nothing because she'd never met him. But she'd seen his photo. Sharp-boned face, dark eyes that seemed to calculate your net worth mid-conversation, the kind of austere beauty that belonged on Renaissance marble. What kind of offer? Her voice sounded distant. Richard opened the folder. Contract dense with legalese. Her eyes caught fragments. Marriage agreement, term of 1 year, compensation upon fulfillment. The words blurred. He'll inject $50 million into Morgan Maritime. Enough to clear the debt, renegotiate with our creditors, keep the company operational. Her father's throat worked. In exchange, you marry him. 1 year minimum. After that, you're free to divorce, and you'll receive a settlement of $10 million. The study tilted. Elena gripped the desk edge, felt the wood grain bite her palms. You're selling me. I'm giving you a choice. But he wouldn't meet her eyes. 48 hours, Elena. That's all the time we have. A choice. The word tasted like copper. You just told me the company dies on Friday. That's not a choice, that's extortion. Damien was very clear. The offer expires Thursday at midnight. Richard finally looked at her, and she saw it. Shame, desperation, and beneath that, the terrible calculus of a drowning man. 300 employees, Elena. Their families. Everything your grandfather built. She wanted to scream. Instead, she heard herself ask, "Why me?" "I don't know." Her father's confession came out broken. He requested you specifically. Said he'd been aware of you. That you were an acceptable match. Aware. The word crawled across her skin. I need to think. Elena moved toward the door, each step deliberate. There's an address in the folder. His penthouse. He's expecting you tomorrow at 7 to discuss terms. She stopped, hand on the brass doorknob. Another family heirloom, another weight of history. And if I say no? Silence answered her. Elena left without looking back. The Tribeca building rose like a glass blade against the October sky. Elena stood across the street, contract folder clutched to her chest, watching lights flicker on in the upper floors. Dusk bled purple across the Hudson. She'd spent 24 hours researching Damien Cross. The public record painted a clear picture. Orphaned at 8, foster care until 16, full scholarship to Columbia, first million by 25. He'd built Cross Capital into an empire by identifying failing companies, acquiring them, and stripping them for parts. Morgan Maritime fit his pattern perfectly. But the private record, the gaps between facts, unsettled her more. No long-term relationships. No close friends mentioned in profiles. A penthouse apartment he'd owned for 3 years but rarely occupied, according to the doorman she'd discreetly questioned. One journalist had called him a man who'd learned to survive by becoming untouchable. Elena checked her phone. 6:58 p.m. She crossed the street. The lobby smelled like money. Leather, subtle cologne, the chemical clean scent of marble polished daily. The concierge, a silver-haired man whose name tag read James, smiled with practiced warmth. "Miss Morgan, Mr. Cross is expecting you. Penthouse level. The elevator will take you directly. No questions. No surprise." He'd been expecting her. The elevator was a cage of mirrors and brass. Elena watched her reflection multiply. Dark hair twisted up, the navy dress she'd chosen for its severity, her mother's pearl earrings. Armor, all of it. She looked composed. Professional. Terrified. The ascent was silent except for the mechanical whisper of cables. 42 floors. She counted each one, breathing slowly. When the doors opened, she stepped into a private foyer. Slate floors, a single orchid on a mid-century console, and beyond floor-to-ceiling windows framing Manhattan like a conquered territory. "Miss Morgan." The voice came from her left. Damien Cross stood in the archway to the living room, and the photographs hadn't prepared her. They'd captured his features, the severe cheekbones, dark hair swept back, the tall frame in its inevitable charcoal suit, but not the presence. He occupied space like a gravitational force, pulling everything toward him. His eyes met hers. Dark, unreadable, focused with an intensity that made her breath catch. "Thank you for coming." He gestured toward the living room. "Please." It wasn't a request. Elena forced herself to move. The penthouse was exactly what she'd expected. Minimalist, expensive, cold. White walls, abstract art. Furniture that prioritized aesthetics over comfort. A space designed for display, not living. "Can I offer you something? Wine, coffee?" "No." She set the folder on the glass coffee table, remained standing. "I'd like to discuss the terms." Direct. "I appreciate that." Damien moved to the bar cart, poured himself 2 fingers of amber liquid. "Gotch, probably. Something older than her." "Your father explained the arrangement." "He explained you're buying me for $50 million. I'm investing in Morgan Maritime. The marriage is a condition of that investment." He took a measured sip, watching her over the glass rim. "There's a difference. Not from where I'm standing." "Then sit." The command in his voice sparked anger through her fear. Elena remained standing. "I'll review the contract here. If the terms are acceptable, I'll take it to my lawyer." "No lawyers." Damien set down his glass. "This agreement stays between us, your father, and my legal team. Non-negotiable." "Then we have nothing to discuss." She reached for the folder. His hand covered hers. The touch was brief. He withdrew immediately, but Elena felt it like a brand. His skin was warm. His palm calloused in a way that surprised her. She looked up and found him closer than before, near enough to see the silver threading his temples, the faint scar bisecting his left eyebrow. "Sit," he repeated, softer now. "Please." Elena sat. Not surrender, strategic retreat. Damien took the chair across from her, elbows on his knees, hands clasped. The posture was almost casual, but his focus never wavered. "The contract is straightforward. We marry within the week. You'll live here, appear with me at necessary social functions, maintain the fiction of a legitimate marriage. In exchange, Morgan Maritime receives $50 million immediately, and you receive $10 million after 1 year. And then you're free. Divorce, annulment, whatever you prefer. I'll have my lawyers handle it quietly." Elena opened the folder, scanned the dense paragraphs. Her eyes snagged on a clause near the end. Asterisk heir provision. Primary objective of union is production of legitimate offspring. Failure to conceive within contract term does not void financial obligations. Asterisk. Her stomach turned. "You want a child. I want an heir." His voice remained level. "There's a difference. You keep saying that. Making distinctions that don't matter." She looked up. You're buying a wife and a womb. At least be honest about it. Something flickered in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. I'm 38 years old. I've built an empire with no one to inherit it. I need a legitimate heir. And I need a wife who understands this is a transaction, not a romance. You need money to save your family's company. Our needs align. Except I don't need this. Elena stood, legs steadier now. I can find another way. There is no other way. Damien rose with her, and the room suddenly felt smaller. I've reviewed your father's finances thoroughly. Every bank has refused him. Every private investor has declined. I'm his last option, which makes me yours. You sound pleased about that. I'm practical about it. He moved to the windows, hands in his pockets. Manhattan glittered below, indifferent and eternal. I could have approached this differently. Made it romantic, courted you, let you believe you had real choice. But I don't traffic in illusions, Elena. This is a contract. You fulfill your end, I fulfill mine. No deception. She joined him at the window, maintaining careful distance. And if I refuse? Then Morgan Maritime files for bankruptcy Friday morning. Your father loses everything. 300 people lose their jobs. He turned his head, profile sharp against the city lights. And you spend the rest of your life wondering if you could have prevented it. The cruelty of it stole her breath. Not because he was wrong, because he was right. Why me? The question escaped before she could stop it. You could have anyone. Why specifically me? For the first time, Damien hesitated. His jaw tightened, and she watched him weigh his answer. I saw you at the Met Gala 2 years ago. You were standing in front of the Sargent portrait alone, and you were luminous, present. Everyone else was performing, but you were actually seeing the art. He paused. I've thought about you since then. When your father's situation became apparent, I saw an opportunity to acquire something I wanted. The honesty was worse than a lie. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. I'm not a painting you can buy and hang on your wall. No, you're more valuable than that. He faced her fully now, and the intensity in his gaze pinned her in place. Sign the contract, Elena. Save your family. 1 year of your life for their security. It's not as terrible a bargain as you think. And the child? We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. His voice dropped lower. I won't force you. But I will expect you to try. The clinical phrasing should have repulsed her. Instead, she felt something darker stir. Curiosity, maybe, or the terrible allure of surrendering to the inevitable. Elena looked down at the contract on the table. 43 pages of legalese, reducing her life to terms and conditions. She thought of her father's hollowed face, the employees who'd worked for Morgan Maritime for decades, the legacy that would crumble if she walked away. She thought of the water ring on the mahogany desk, and her grandfather's ghost asking what she was willing to sacrifice. I need a pen, she heard herself say. Damien retrieved one from his suit jacket, a heavy fountain pen, the kind that signed important documents. He handed it to her, and their fingers brushed again. Elena sat, uncapped the pen, and signed her name on the final page. Her handwriting looked foreign, like someone else's hand had guided the letters. When she looked up, Damien was watching her with an expression she couldn't read. Satisfaction, yes. But beneath that, something hungrier. 1 year, she said. Then I'm free. He took the contract, studied her signature, then met her eyes. You have 1 year to give me an heir, Elena. After that, you're free. The words settled over her like a cage door closing. Quiet, final, and locked from the outside. Chapter 1, The First Night. The marriage happened in a courthouse that smelled like floor wax and institutional despair. Elena stood before a judge whose boredom was palpable, Damien's hand a brand against her lower back, and spoke vows that tasted like ash. I do. 2 words. A lifetime of consequences. The witnesses were strangers. Damien's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, And his driver, whose name Elena hadn't caught. No family. No friends. No white dress or flowers or pretense that this was anything but a transaction being notarized. When the judge pronounced them married, Damien's kiss was brief, controlled. His lips brushed hers with the clinical precision of a signature on a contract. Then it was over. "The car's waiting," he said, and guided her toward the exit. Elena's heels echoed on marble as they descended the courthouse steps. October wind cut through her cream silk blouse. She'd chosen it this morning in her childhood bedroom, hands shaking, knowing it was the last time she'd wake up as Elena Morgan. The navy pencil skirt, the modest heels, the pearl earrings. Armor that hadn't protected her at all. The black Mercedes idled at the curb, sleek and predatory. The driver opened the rear door. Damien's hand remained on her back, proprietary, as he helped her inside. The leather seats were cold. Elena pressed herself against the far door as Damien slid in beside her, his thigh inches from hers. The door closed with a solid thunk. German engineering, built to contain. "Tribeca, Mr. Cross?" the driver asked. "Yes." The partition rose, sealing them in silence. Elena watched Brooklyn Heights blur past the tinted windows. Somewhere in that maze of brownstones, her father was probably pouring his third scotch, telling himself he'd done the right thing. The 50 million had transferred this morning. She'd checked her phone compulsively, watching the numbers appear in Morgan Maritime's account like blood money. "You're quiet." Damien's voice cut through her thoughts. "What would you like me to say?" Elena kept her gaze on the window. "Congratulations on your acquisition. I'd prefer honesty to sarcasm." She turned to face him. In the car's dim interior, his features were all angles and shadows. "Honestly, I feel like I've been sold. Legally. Irrevocably. And now I'm being delivered to my new owner." "Your new husband," he corrected. "Is there a difference?" His jaw tightened. "We both signed that contract, Elena. You had a choice." "Did I?" The question came out sharper than intended. "Because from where I'm sitting, you engineered a situation where I had no choice at all." Damien studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself not to look away. Finally he said, "You could have walked away, let the company fail. That was always an option. And condemned 300 people to unemployment. Destroyed my family's legacy." "Yes." No apology in his voice. "Those would have been the consequences. But they would have been your father's consequences, not yours. You chose to carry them." The accuracy stung. Elena turned back to the window. "How generous of you to absolve me." "I'm not absolving you. I'm acknowledging your agency." His hand moved, she tensed, but he only adjusted his cufflink. "You'll find I have little patience for victims, Elena. You made a choice. Own it." The car glided through Lower Manhattan, past boutiques and cafes where normal people lived normal lives. Elena watched a couple laughing on a corner, the woman's hand tucked into the man's elbow, and felt the distance between their world and hers yawn open. "We're here," Damien said. The building rose before them, all glass and steel and money. The driver opened her door. Damien emerged from his side, came around, and offered his hand. Elena stared at it. Long fingers, neat nails, that surprising callus on his palm, and made herself take it. His grip was firm, warm, possessive. The lobby was exactly as she remembered. Marble and leather and James the concierge offering his practiced smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Cross, Mrs. Cross." The name hit her like a slap. Mrs. Cross. She'd lost Morgan with those 2 words in the courthouse. "Thank you, James." Damien guided her toward the elevator, his hand shifting to the small of her back again. Elena waited until the elevator doors closed before stepping away from his touch. "Don't." "Don't what?" "Touch me like you own me." Damien leaned against the brass rail, arms crossed. "I touch you like you're my wife. There's a difference. You keep making those distinctions." The elevator climbed, floor numbers ticking upward. As if calling it something prettier changes what it is. What is it, then? In your words. She met his gaze in the mirrored wall. Ownership with better paperwork. Something flickered in his expression. Anger, maybe, or something darker. You think very little of me. I don't know you well enough to think anything of you. The elevator chimed. 42nd floor. That's the problem, isn't it? I just married a stranger. The doors opened onto the private foyer. Damien stepped out first, then turned back, blocking her exit. Then let me clarify something, Elena. I don't own you. I've bound you to a contract, one you signed willingly, but your thoughts, your feelings, your essential self, those remain yours. I'm not interested in breaking you. Just using me. Chapter 1, The First Night. The marriage happened in a courthouse that smelled like floor wax and institutional despair. Elena stood before a judge whose boredom was palpable, Damien's hand a brand against her lower back, and spoke vows that tasted like ash. I do. 2 words. A lifetime of consequences. The witnesses were strangers. Damien's attorney, a sharp-eyed woman named Victoria Chen, and his driver, whose name Elena hadn't caught. No family. No friends. No white dress or flowers or pretense that this was anything but a transaction being notarized. When the judge pronounced them married, Damien's kiss was brief, controlled. His lips brushed hers with the clinical precision of a signature on a contract. Then it was over. The car's waiting, he said, and guided her toward the exit. Elena's heels echoed on marble as they descended the courthouse steps. October wind cut through her cream silk blouse. She'd chosen it this morning in her childhood bedroom, hands shaking, knowing it was the last time she'd wake up as Elena Morgan. The navy pencil skirt, the modest heels, the pearl earrings. Armor that hadn't protected her at all. The black Mercedes idled at the curb, sleek and predatory. The driver opened the rear door. Damien's hand remained on her back, proprietary, as he helped her inside. The leather seats were cold. Elena pressed herself against the far door as Damien slid in beside her, his thigh inches from hers. The door closed with a solid thunk. German engineering, built to contain. Tribeca, Mr. Cross? The driver asked. Yes. The partition rose, sealing them in silence. Elena watched Brooklyn Heights blur past the tinted windows. Somewhere in that maze of brownstones, her father was probably pouring his third scotch, telling himself he'd done the right thing. The 50 million had transferred this morning. She checked her phone compulsively, watching the numbers appear in Morgan Maritime's account like blood money. You're quiet. Damien's voice cut through her thoughts. What would you like me to say? Elena kept her gaze on the window. Congratulations on your acquisition. I'd prefer honesty to sarcasm. She turned to face him. In the car's dim interior, his features were all angles and shadows. Honestly, I feel like I've been sold. Legally. Irrevocably. And now I'm being delivered to my new owner. Your new husband, he corrected. Is there a difference? His jaw tightened. We both signed that contract, Elena. You had a choice. Did I? The question came out sharper than intended. Because from where I'm sitting, you engineered a situation where I had no choice at all. Damien studied her for a long moment, and she forced herself not to look away. Finally he said, you could have walked away, let the company fail. That was always an option. And condemned 300 people to unemployment. Destroyed my family's legacy. Yes. No apology in his voice. Those would have been the consequences. But they would have been your father's consequences, not yours. You chose to carry them. The accuracy stung. Elena turned back to the window. How generous of you to absolve me. I'm not absolving you. I'm acknowledging your agency. His hand moved, she tensed, but he only adjusted his cufflink. You'll find I have little patience for victims, Elena. You made a choice. Own it. The car glided through lower Manhattan, past boutiques and cafes where normal people lived normal lives. Elena watched a couple laughing on a corner, the woman's hand tucked into the man's elbow, and felt the distance between their world and hers yawn open. "We're here," Damien said. The building rose before them, all glass and steel and money. The driver opened her door. Damien emerged from his side, came around, and offered his hand. Elena stared at it. Long fingers, neat nails, that surprising callus on his palm, and made herself take it. His grip was firm, warm, possessive. The lobby was exactly as she remembered. Marble and leather, and James the concierge offering his practiced smile. "Congratulations, Mr. Cross, Mrs. Cross." The name hit her like a slap. Mrs. Cross. She'd lost Morgan with those 2 words in the courthouse. "Thank you, James." Damien guided her toward the elevator, his hand shifting to the small of her back again. Elena waited until the elevator doors closed before stepping away from his touch. Don't what? Touch me like you own me." Damien leaned against the brass rail, arms crossed. "I touch you like you're my wife. There's a difference. You keep making those distinctions." The elevator climbed, floor numbers ticking upward. As if calling it something prettier changes what it is. "What is it, then? In your words?" She met his gaze in the mirrored wall. "Ownership with better paperwork." Something flickered in his expression. Anger, maybe, or something darker. "You think very little of me. I don't know you well enough to think anything of you." The elevator chimed. 42nd floor. "That's the problem, isn't it? I just married a stranger." The doors opened onto the private foyer. Damien stepped out first, then turned back, blocking her exit. "Then let me clarify something, Elena. I don't own you. I've bound you to a contract, one you signed willingly, but your thoughts, your feelings, your essential self, those remain yours. I'm not interested in breaking you. Just using me." Yes. The honesty was brutal. For a specific purpose, for a limited time. But I'll never pretend it's something it's not. He moved aside, and Elena stepped into the penthouse. The space looked different at night. The floor-to-ceiling windows reflected the room back at itself, turning the minimalist furniture into ghost shapes. Manhattan sprawled beyond the glass, a galaxy of lights and lives she was no longer part of. "Your room is this way." Damien walked down a hallway to the left. Elena followed, heels muffled by expensive carpet. He stopped at a door, pushed it open, and stepped aside. The bedroom was larger than her entire childhood room. King bed with white linens, mid-century dresser. A door that presumably led to a bathroom. Impersonal. Elegant. A hotel room pretending to be a home. "Your things arrived this afternoon. Victoria had them unpacked." Damien gestured to the closet. "If anything's missing, let me know." Elena stepped inside, ran her hand along the dresser. Her jewelry box sat on top. Her mother's pearls, her grandmother's wedding band, the silver bracelet her father had given her for her 21st birthday. Pieces of a life that felt very far away. "Where's your room?" she asked. "Master suite. Other end of the hall. Separate bedrooms." She should feel relieved. Instead, she felt the loneliness of it. Married and sleeping alone, bound but untouched. "There are rules," Damien said from the doorway. "We should establish them now." Elena turned. He filled the frame, backlit by hallway light, face half in shadow. "Rules. Boundaries. Expectations." He stepped inside, and the room shrank around him. "First, public appearances. I'll need you at certain functions. Galas, business dinners, the occasional weekend event. You'll be informed 72 hours in advance when possible." How considerate. He ignored the sarcasm. "Second, this penthouse is your home now, but my office is off limits. The room at the end of the hall, past the master suite. It stays locked." Elena thought of the locked door she'd noticed during her first visit. "What's in there?" "My private business. Which remains private. We're married. Doesn't that entitle me to?" "No." The word was flat, final. "That room is my boundary. Respect it." She wanted to argue, but the steel in his voice stopped her. "Fine. What else? Third, no emotional entanglement. Damien moved to the window, hands in his pockets. We're partners in a transaction. Civility is expected. Friendship is optional. But don't mistake proximity for intimacy, Elena. This isn't a love story. You've made that abundantly clear. She crossed her arms. Anything else? He turned, and the city lights behind him turned his eyes to black. The HEIR clause. We should discuss expectations. Elena's stomach tightened. Now, I'm not suggesting we consummate the marriage tonight. His voice remained clinical. But we should establish a timeline. The contract specifies 1 year. That gives us time to become comfortable with each other. Comfortable. The word felt obscene. You want me to become comfortable with the idea of sleeping with you. I want us both to approach it as adults. Without coercion. He paused. I meant what I said in the courthouse. I won't force you. But I will expect good faith effort. How romantic. Romance was never part of the agreement. Damien crossed to the door, then stopped. You should know, I don't bring women here. This penthouse is private. You won't encounter anyone from my previous arrangements. Elena blinked. Are you trying to reassure me? I'm establishing facts. You're my wife now. That means something, even in a contract marriage. It means you won't humiliate me publicly. It means I take the commitment seriously. Even if you don't believe that yet. He opened the door. There's food in the kitchen if you're hungry. I have work to finish. Sleep well, Elena. He left, pulling the door closed behind him. Elena stood in the center of the room, listening to his footsteps recede down the hall. A door opened, closed. Silence settled over the penthouse like snow. She moved to the window, pressed her forehead against the cold glass. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights, her father was probably asleep, conscience dulled by expensive scotch. Somewhere people were falling in love, getting married for real, building lives that weren't constructed from contracts and coercion. Elena closed her eyes and saw the courthouse again. Damien's hand on her back. The judge's bored expression. The kiss that had sealed her fate. You made a choice, Damien had said. Own it. She opened her eyes, studied her reflection in the dark glass. Still recognizable, same dark hair, same features, but fundamentally altered. Mrs. Cross now. Bound for a year. Expected to produce an heir like some medieval arrangement. Elena turned from the window and began unpacking. Her hands moved automatically. Hanging dresses in the closet, arranging toiletries in the bathroom. The bathroom was marble and chrome, with a shower large enough for two and a tub that could drown in. She was folding sweaters into the dresser when she found it, a small box she didn't recognize, tucked between her cashmere cardigans. Elena lifted the lid. Inside a key. Single brass, old-fashioned. The kind that opened serious locks. No note. No explanation. Elena held it up to the light, watched it gleam. Then she thought of Damien's warning. Asterisk, that room is my boundary. Respect it, asterisk. She closed her fist around the key, felt its teeth bite her palm. Down the hall, past the master suite, a door stayed locked. And Elena Cross, née Morgan, married 6 hours, owned but not broken, made a decision. She would learn what her husband was hiding. But not tonight. Tonight, she would sleep in her cage and plan her rebellion. Elena tucked the key into her jewelry box, between her mother's pearls and her grandmother's ring. Then she changed into pajamas, turned off the lights, and climbed into the enormous bed. The sheets smelled like lavender and money. The pillow was too soft. The room was too quiet. She lay in the dark, listening to the penthouse breathe, and thought about the man at the other end of the hall. Her husband, her captor, her choice. Somewhere in the building a door opened. Footsteps in the hallway. Measured, deliberate. They stopped outside her room. Elena held her breath. The footsteps resumed. Moved away. Another door opened, closed. She exhaled slowly, pulse hammering. This was her life now. Separate bedrooms and locked doors, and a stranger who'd bought her with $50 million and expected her to give him an heir. Elena closed her eyes and whispered to the darkness. 1 year. I can survive 1 year. But as sleep finally claimed her, she dreamed of locked rooms and brass keys and Damien's voice saying, "Don't mistake this for a fairy tale, Elena." She woke at 3 a.m., certain someone was watching her. The room was empty. The door was closed. But the feeling persisted. Eyes on her skin, breath on her neck, presence just beyond sight. Elena sat up, heart racing. Moonlight slanted through the windows, turning everything silver and strange. She was alone. But in the hallway she heard it. A door opening. A step. Then silence. She slipped out of bed, moved to her own door, pressed her ear against the wood. Nothing. Just the building's mechanical hum and her own ragged breathing. Elena returned to bed, pulled the covers to her chin, and stared at the ceiling until dawn. When morning light finally broke over Manhattan, she rose and dressed and prepared to face her first full day as Damien Cross's wife. The key in her jewelry box seemed to pulse with possibility. "That room is my boundary," he'd said. But boundaries, Elena was learning, were made to be tested. Chapter 2. The performance. Elena woke to the smell of coffee and the distant clatter of dishes. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then the white ceiling came into focus, the unfamiliar weight of expensive linens, the floor-to-ceiling windows framing a Manhattan morning. Mrs. Cross. The name sat heavy in her chest. She found a robe hanging in the closet. Silk, ivory, certainly not hers, and pulled it on before venturing into the hallway. The penthouse looked different in daylight. Less fortress, more museum. Abstract paintings she hadn't noticed last night lined the walls. A sculpture that might have been a Giacometti stood sentinel near the living room entrance. Damien sat at the kitchen island, laptop open, coffee steaming beside him. He'd already showered. Dark hair still damp, white dress shirt rolled to his elbows. He looked up as she entered, and something flickered in his expression before the mask descended. "There's coffee. Cups in the cabinet above the machine." He returned his attention to the screen. Elena poured herself a cup, added cream from the refrigerator. The kitchen was aggressively modern. Marble counters, commercial-grade appliances, nothing that suggested anyone actually cooked here. She leaned against the counter, cradling the mug. "Do you have a housekeeper?" she asked. "She comes Tuesdays and Fridays. Leaves dinner in the refrigerator." Damien typed something, frowned at the result. "If you need her more frequently, I can arrange it. I'm not an invalid. I can cook. I didn't suggest you were." He closed the laptop. "We have an event tonight. The Ashford Foundation Gala at the Plaza. Cocktails at 7, dinner at 8. Victoria will send over dress options this afternoon." Elena set down her mug. "You're telling me, not asking me. I'm informing you of our schedule. As discussed." His gaze held hers. "This is part of the arrangement, Elena. Public appearances. Playing the role. The role of the devoted wife. The role of my wife. However you choose to interpret that." She moved to the windows, looked down at the street 42 floors below. Morning traffic crept through Tribeca, people heading to real jobs, real lives. "What's the story? How did we meet?" "The truth, mostly. I saw you at a gala 2 years ago. We reconnected recently through your father's business. The courtship was private, the wedding quiet because we both value discretion." Damien joined her at the window, maintaining careful distance. "Keep it simple. The less we elaborate, the less we can contradict. And if someone asks why the rush, tell them when you know you know." His mouth curved, not quite a smile. "People believe what they want to believe about love. Give them the framework, they'll fill in the romance themselves." The cynicism of it settled over her like frost. Elena turned to face him. "You've done this before. I've managed public perception before. It's not that different. Except this time you're managing a wife, not a corporate acquisition. Is there a difference?" He echoed her words from yesterday, and the callback felt deliberate. Elena held his gaze. You tell me, Damien. Is there? For a moment, something real moved behind his eyes, too quick to name, gone before she could catch it. Then the veneer returned. I have calls until 3. Victoria will be here at 4 with the dresses. Choose whichever you prefer. He collected his laptop and coffee, headed toward the hallway. Elena watched him go, noticed the tension in his shoulders, the controlled precision of his movements. A man who'd learned to reveal nothing. Damien. He stopped, didn't turn. Last night. Did you come to my room? No. He looked back, and his expression was unreadable. But I wanted to. Sleep well. He disappeared down the hall before she could answer. Victoria Chan arrived at 4 o'clock sharp, trailing 2 assistants laden with garment bags. She was mid-40s, elegant in a way that suggested old money and new power, with sharp eyes that catalogued everything. Mrs. Cross. She extended a hand. A pleasure to finally meet you properly. Elena shook it, felt the assessment in the other woman's grip. Thank you for arranging this. Damien's instructions were very specific. Victoria gestured to her assistants, who began hanging dresses on a rack they'd assembled in the living room. He wants you comfortable but appropriate. I've pulled 6 options. All designers, all tailored to your measurements. How do you have my measurements? I'm very good at my job. Victoria's smile was professional, revealing nothing. Shall we start with the Valentino? The next hour passed in a blur of silk and satin. Elena tried on each dress while Victoria circled, adjusting hems, scrutinizing seams. The assistants took notes on tablets, murmuring to each other in fashion shorthand. The 5th dress stopped her. Midnight blue off-shoulder, with a neckline that dipped just low enough to suggest without revealing. The fabric moved like water, catching light as she turned. That's the one, Victoria said. Damien will approve. Elena studied her reflection. The woman in the mirror looked sophisticated, expensive, like someone who belonged on Damien Cross's arm. I'm not dressing for his approval. No. Victoria's eyebrow arched. Then why do you keep glancing at the hallway? Because she was listening for his footsteps, wondering if he'd emerge from his office to see her. Elena forced herself to look away from the mirror. This one is fine. It's more than fine. It's perfect. Victoria nodded to her assistants, who began packing the rejected dresses. Shoes, jewelry, and a clutch will be delivered by 6. Hair and makeup. I can manage. I'm sure you can. But Damien's image is important, which means your image is important. Victoria's voice softened slightly. This is the first time he's appeared publicly with a wife. People will be watching, judging, looking for cracks. Elena met the other woman's eyes. Are you warning me or threatening me? I'm preparing you. There's a difference. Victoria collected her tablet. The society pages have been speculating about Damien's personal life for years. You're going to be tonight's main story. How you handle it sets the tone for everything that follows. After Victoria left, Elena stood alone in the living room, the blue dress hanging like a question mark. Through the windows, afternoon was bleeding into evening, the city preparing for night. She thought about her last gala, 6 months ago, representing Morgan Maritime at a shipping industry event. She'd worn a simple black dress, spent the evening making small talk with her father's colleagues, gone home alone to her Brooklyn Heights apartment. That Elena felt like a stranger now. The dress whispered as she carried it to her room. At 6:30, Elena stood before her bathroom mirror, applying the last of her lipstick. The woman looking back was armored, hair swept into a low chignon, makeup subtle but precise, the blue dress transforming her into someone who belonged in Damien's world. She fastened her mother's pearl earrings, the only piece of her old life she'd allowed herself, and took a breath. A knock on her door. Elena. We should leave in 10 minutes. She opened the door. Damien stood in the hallway, and the sight of him stole her breath. Black tuxedo, perfectly tailored, white shirt crisp against his skin. He'd shaved, tamed his hair, and the effect was devastating. All sharp lines and controlled power. His eyes moved over her, slow and assessing. Something shifted in his expression. You look. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. Acceptable. The word landed like a slap. Elena lifted her chin. How generous. I meant, he exhaled. You look beautiful. Is that what you wanted to hear? I wanted honesty. Thank you for providing it. She collected her clutch from the dresser, brushed past him into the hallway. His hand caught her wrist, gentle but firm enough to stop her. Elena. She looked back. His face was closer than she'd expected, near enough to see the silver threading his temples, smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. This will be easier if we're not at war, he said quietly. Then stop treating me like a possession you're displaying. I'm treating you like my wife, who happens to be stunning in that dress. His thumb brushed the inside of her wrist, found her pulse. Is it so hard to accept a compliment? From you? Yes. But her heart was racing, and they both knew he could feel it. Damien released her wrist, stepped back. The car's waiting. The plaza blazed with light. Photographers clustered on the red carpet like predators scenting blood. Elena felt her stomach clench as the Mercedes pulled up. Remember, Damien said, his hand finding the small of her back. Simple story. Private courtship. Keep smiling. The door opened. Camera flashes erupted. Damien emerged first, then turned to help her out. His hand was steady, warm, and when she stood beside him, his arm moved to her waist. Proprietary, unmistakable. Mr. Cross. Over here. Mr. Cross, who's your date? Is this your wife? Damien guided her forward, his body angled to shield her from the worst of the crush. They paused at the step and repeat, and Elena felt his hand tighten on her waist. Smile, he murmured. Like you're happy to be here. She smiled. The cameras loved it. Inside, the ballroom was a study in old money and new power. Crystal chandeliers, champagne circulating on silver trays, women in couture and men in tuxedos discussing mergers like foreplay. Elena recognized faces from Forbes covers, society pages, her father's business dinners. They all turned to stare. Damien Cross. A silver-haired man approached, hand extended. I heard rumors you'd finally been domesticated. Robert. Damien shook his hand, and Elena felt him shift into performance mode. Smile warmer, posture relaxed, the corporate predator disguised as charming guest. Allow me to introduce my wife, Elena. Elena, Robert Ashford. Tonight's host. Mrs. Cross. Robert took her hand, held it a beat too long. A pleasure. I didn't know Damien was capable of marriage. Neither did I, Elena said smoothly. But he's full of surprises. Robert laughed. Damien's hand on her waist tightened fractionally. Warning or approval, she couldn't tell. The evening became a blur of introductions. Damien never left her side, his touch constant. Hand on her back, fingers brushing her elbow, palm resting possessively at her waist. To anyone watching, they looked like newlyweds, comfortable in each other's space. Elena felt like a doll being positioned. You're doing well, Damien murmured during a break in conversation. He'd guided her to a quiet corner, procured champagne. Natural performer. I've had practice. My father used to bring me to these events. She sipped the champagne, watched the crowd over the rim. I know how to smile and nod while men discuss business like I'm not there. Is that what I'm doing? Isn't it? She met his eyes. Every introduction, you've positioned me as an accessory. Wife. Your acquisition. Never asking what I do, what I think, who I am beyond Mrs. Cross. Damien's jaw tightened. What would you prefer? To be treated like a person, not a prop. You are a person who agreed to be my wife, which includes playing this role. His voice dropped lower. Or would you prefer I introduce you as the woman I bought to save her father's company? The cruelty of it made her flinch. Elena set down her champagne. Excuse me. I need the restroom. His hand caught hers. Elena. Let go, Damien. He did immediately. But his eyes followed her as she walked away. The ladies' room was a sanctuary of marble and soft lighting. Elena locked herself in a stall, pressed her forehead against the cool metal door, and breathed. This was her life now. Performing at galas, smiling while Damien's hand claimed her, pretending this was anything but a transaction with better lighting. 1 year, she reminded herself. You can survive 1 year. The bathroom door opened. Voices filtered in. Female, cultured, vicious. Did you see Damien Cross's wife? Where did he find her? I heard it was arranged. Her father's company was failing. So he bought her. How very medieval. Elena froze in the stall. She's pretty enough, I suppose. In that wholesome, boring way. Not his usual type. Damien doesn't have a type. He has acquisitions. Laughter sharp as glass. Give it 6 months. He'll be back to his old patterns, and she'll be crying in her penthouse. The voices faded. Faucet ran. The door opened and closed. Elena emerged from the stall, studied herself in the mirror. The woman looking back was composed, elegant, empty. She reapplied her lipstick with steady hands. When she returned to the ballroom, Damien was deep in conversation with a group of men. Hedge fund managers, probably, discussing whatever predators discussed when they gathered. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression shifted. Gentlemen, excuse me. He left them mid-sentence, crossed to her. Are you all right? Perfect. Elena accepted a fresh champagne flute from a passing waiter. Why wouldn't I be? Because you look like you want to murder someone. Just considering my options. She sipped the champagne, watched him over the rim. Tell me, Damien, what are your old patterns? His eyes narrowed. What? The women in the bathroom were very enlightening. Apparently I'm not your usual type. Too wholesome. Too boring. She smiled sharp enough to cut. They give us 6 months before you're back to your acquisitions. Damien's hand found her elbow, guided her toward the terrace doors. The night air was cold, October biting through her dress, but the terrace was blessedly empty. What did they say? His voice was controlled, dangerous. The truth, I imagine. That you bought me. That this is temporary. That I'm just another acquisition in your collection. Elena set down her champagne. They're not wrong, are they? They're vultures who feed on gossip. He moved closer, and she could see the anger in his eyes now. You want to know my old patterns. I don't have relationships. Have arrangements. Discreet, temporary, mutually beneficial. No one gets hurt because no one expects more than what's offered. How romantic. It's honest. Which is more than most people manage. His hand cupped her jaw, tilted her face up. But you're not an arrangement, Elena. You're my wife. There's a difference. You keep saying that. Because it's true. His thumb brushed her cheekbone. Those women in the bathroom. They're jealous. Because I've never brought anyone to these events. Never introduced anyone as mine. Never looked at anyone the way I'm looking at you right now. Elena's breath caught. And how are you looking at me? Like I want to take you home and prove to you exactly how different you are. The heat in his voice sent electricity down her spine. Elena stepped back, breaking contact. We should return to the gala. Elena. You're performing, Damien. Just like you taught me. She moved toward the doors. Don't mistake it for something real. His hand caught her wrist, spun her back. For a moment they stood frozen. His chest rising and falling, her pulse hammering, the space between them charged with something dangerous. This is real, he said quietly. Whether you believe it or not. Then he released her and walked back inside. Elena stood alone on the terrace, Manhattan glittering below, and tried to steady her breathing. They left the gala at 11. The car ride home was silent. Damien staring out his window, Elena out hers, the partition between them more than just glass. When they reached the penthouse, he went straight to his office. Elena heard the lock click. She stood in the hallway, still in her blue dress, and thought about the key hidden in her jewelry box. That room is my boundary, he'd said. But he'd also said this is real. And Elena needed to know which statement was true. She changed into pajamas, washed off her makeup, unpinned her hair. Then she retrieved the key from between her mother's pearls and her grandmother's ring. The hallway was dark, the penthouse silent except for the building's mechanical hum. Elena moved past the master suite, door closed, no light beneath, to the locked room at the end of the hall. Her hand trembled as she fitted the key into the lock. It turned smoothly, well-oiled. The door opened without sound. Elena stepped inside and found the light switch. The room blazed to life, and her breath stopped. Not an office. Gallery. Photographs covered every wall. Dozens of them, maybe hundreds. All of her. At the Met Gala 2 years ago, standing before the Sargent portrait. Walking through Brooklyn Heights last spring. Having coffee at her favorite cafe. Entering Morgan Maritime's offices. Laughing with friends at a restaurant she'd visited once months ago. A timeline of her life, documented and displayed like a museum exhibition. In the center of the room, a desk, a computer, files stacked neatly. Elena moved closer, hands shaking, and opened the top folder. Background check. Financial records. Her college transcripts. Medical history. A dossier so complete it felt like violation. She heard it then, the shift of weight, the intake of breath. Elena turned. Damien stood in the doorway, still in his tuxedo, face unreadable. "I was wondering," he said quietly, "when you'd use that key." Chapter 3, The Locked Room. The photographs stared back at Elena from every wall. 100 versions of herself, captured without permission, curated without consent. Her hand tightened on the folder as Damien stepped into the room. "When did you plant the key?" Her voice sounded distant, clinical. "Shock probably. The body's mercy when the mind couldn't process the betrayal." "I didn't." He closed the door behind him, leaned against it. "Victoria left it in your things. Against my instructions. How considerate of her." Elena set down the folder, turned to face the wall of photographs. There, the Met Gala, her profile illuminated by gallery light. And there, Brooklyn Heights, her hair caught by wind, coffee cup in hand. Dozens more, a chronology of surveillance. 2 years. "You've been watching me for 2 years." "Yes." The admission landed without apology. Elena forced herself to look at him. He'd removed his bow tie, unbuttoned his collar, but his posture remained controlled. A man prepared for interrogation. "The contract," she said slowly. "My father's crisis. You didn't just take advantage of the situation. You created it." "No." Damien moved into the room, careful to maintain distance. "Your father's business partner embezzled funds. I simply declined to offer assistance until the situation became critical. You let him drown so you could buy me. I let him face the consequences of his poor judgment. The marriage was my price for intervention." He gestured to the photographs. "I won't apologize for wanting you, Elena. Or for taking steps to acquire you." The clinical language made her stomach turn. "I'm not a company you can acquire. No. You're infinitely more valuable." He crossed to the desk, opened a drawer, withdrew another folder. "This is what I didn't show you. What I protected you from knowing." Elena took the folder with numb fingers. Inside, bank statements, emails, wire transfers. Her father's business partner, Marcus Webb, siphoning money systematically over 18 months. And there, highlighted in yellow, payments to offshore accounts, shell corporations, a paper trail of systematic theft. "Marcus stole $12 million, Damien said quietly. "Your father never noticed because he trusted him." By the time the creditors came calling, Morgan Maritime was hemorrhaging cash with no way to stop the bleeding. Elena's hand shook. Why didn't you tell him? Why let it get this bad? Because I wanted leverage. He moved closer and she could smell his cologne now. Cedar and something darker. I saw you 2 years ago and I wanted you. Not for a night, not for an arrangement. I wanted to bind you to me legally, permanently. So I waited. And when the opportunity presented itself, I took it. The honesty was worse than a lie. Elena threw the folder at him. Papers exploding between them, scattering across the floor. You're a monster. Yes. He didn't move to pick up the papers. But I'm a monster who saved your family from criminal prosecution. Marcus is currently cooperating with federal investigators in exchange for a reduced sentence. Your father's reputation remains intact. Morgan Maritime survives. Because you engineered it that way. You controlled everything. Elena's voice cracked. Even my choice wasn't real. You manipulated the situation so I'd have no option but to sign. I created circumstances that aligned with my goals. That's not manipulation, it's strategy. Damien's jaw tightened. And you did have a choice, Elena. You could have walked away. Let your father face the consequences. Let Marcus's theft become public. Let 300 people lose their jobs. But you didn't. Because you made it impossible. I made it costly. There's a difference. He moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. You chose your family over your freedom. That's not weakness. That's strength. Don't diminish it by pretending you were helpless. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. You're trying to make this sound noble. Like you did me a favor. I'm making it sound like what it is. A transaction where both parties got what they needed. You needed money to save your family. I needed a wife who understood the terms. His voice dropped lower. And I wanted you. Specifically. Completely. Enough to spend 2 years planning how to make you mine. The possessiveness in his tone sent ice down her spine. That's not love. That's obsession. I never claimed to love you. Damien's hand lifted, almost touched her face, then dropped. Love is a fiction people tell themselves to justify irrational behavior. I don't traffic in fictions. I wanted you so I acquired you. It's the most honest thing I've ever done. Elena looked around the room again. The photographs, the files, the evidence of his systematic invasion of her life. This is sick. This is thorough. He followed her gaze. I needed to know you. Your patterns, your preferences, what made you smile. I needed to understand what I was acquiring before I made my offer. I'm not a painting you researched before purchase. No, you're much more complex. Which is why I took my time. Damien moved to the wall, touched one of the photographs. Her laughing with friends outside a restaurant. This one is my favorite. You're unguarded here. Happy. I wanted to know what it would take to make you look like that with me. The intimacy of the observation made her skin crawl. You're delusional if you think I'll ever look at you like that. Perhaps. He turned back to her. But I have 11 months to try. Elena forced herself to breathe slowly, evenly. Panic wouldn't help. Anger wouldn't help. She needed to think. The contract. Is there an exit clause? You want to leave. I want to know my options. Damien studied her for a long moment. Section 12, subsection C. Either party may terminate the agreement with 90 days' notice and forfeiture of all financial considerations. You'd leave with nothing. Morgan Maritime would have to return the $50 million within 30 days. Which they can't do. No. His voice was gentle, almost kind. Which means you're bound to me for the full term. Unless you're willing to destroy your family to escape me. The trap closed around her with perfect precision. Elena looked at the photographs again, saw herself captured and catalogued, and felt something shift inside her. From fear to fury, from victim to something harder. You want honesty. She met his eyes. I hate you. I hate this room, I hate what you've done, and I hate that you're right. I can't leave. But don't mistake my staying for acceptance, Damien. And don't ever mistake it for affection. Something flickered in his expression. Pain, maybe, or disappointment. Noted. I want this room locked. I don't want to see these photographs again. Agreed. And I want your word, no more surveillance. No more watching. No more files on my life. Damien was quiet for a moment. I can't promise that. Then we have a problem. I can promise to be more discreet. He moved closer, and this time she did retreat, back hitting the wall beside a photograph of herself at a bookstore. I need to know you're safe, Elena. That's not negotiable. But I'll stop the active surveillance. No more photographs. No more tracking. You have my word. Your word. She laughed, sharp and bitter. Forgive me if I don't find that particularly reassuring. It's all I can offer. His hand pressed against the wall beside her head, caging her without touching. I know you hate me right now. I accept that. But understand, everything I've done I did to make you mine. I won't apologize for wanting you. I won't apologize for taking steps to acquire you. And I won't apologize for doing whatever's necessary to keep you. Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. You can't keep someone who doesn't want to be kept. Can't I? His voice was soft, dangerous. You're here, aren't you? In my home, wearing my ring, bound by a contract you signed willingly. You can hate me all you want, Elena. But you're still mine for 11 more months. The echo of his earlier words, the hook that had closed the trap. Elena felt the fury crystallize into something colder, more useful. Then I'll count the days. I expect you will. Damien pushed away from the wall, creating distance. It's late. You should sleep. In the room you chose for me. In the home you control. Living the life you engineered. Elena moved toward the door. Tell me, Damien, does it bother you at all? That everything about this is forced. He caught her wrist as she passed, gentle but firm enough to stop her. It bothers me that you think you had no agency. That you're casting yourself as a victim when you made a calculated choice to save your family. His thumb found her pulse, pressed lightly. You're stronger than you think, Elena. Strong enough to survive me. Maybe even strong enough to understand me. I don't want to understand you. Liar. He released her wrist. You want to understand exactly what you've bound yourself to. That's why you used the key. That's why you're still standing here instead of locked in your room. You're curious. The accuracy stung. Elena pulled away. I'm leaving. One more thing. Damien's voice stopped her at the door. The HEIR clause. We should discuss timeline. Her stomach clenched. Not tonight. No. But soon. He moved to the desk, began gathering the scattered papers. We both know what the contract requires. Better to approach it pragmatically than let it become a source of ongoing tension. Elena's fingernails bit into her palms. You want to schedule when we have sex. How romantic. I want us both to be prepared, comfortable, willing participants rather than reluctant adversaries. He looked up, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. Despite what you think, I don't want to force you, Elena. I want you to choose it. Choose me. Even if it's just physically. That will never happen. We'll see. He returned to the papers, dismissing her. Sleep well, Mrs. Cross. Elena left, pulling the door closed behind her. In the hallway, she pressed her back against the wall and tried to steady her breathing. Her heart hammered against her ribs, adrenaline and fury and something darker she didn't want to name. The photographs. The files. 2 years of surveillance. He'd been watching her, wanting her, planning this. And she'd walked into his trap because she'd had no choice. Because he'd engineered a situation where she'd have no choice. You're stronger than you think, he'd said. Elena pushed away from the wall and walked to her room. Inside she locked the door. Knowing it was futile, knowing he probably had keys to every lock in the penthouse, and moved to the window. Manhattan glittered below, indifferent and eternal. Somewhere in that sprawl of lights, people were living normal lives. Falling in love. Getting married because they wanted to. building futures that weren't constructed from contracts and coercion and a billionaire's obsession. Elena pressed her forehead against the cold glass and made herself a promise. She would survive this. She would endure the 11 months. And when the contract ended, she would walk away with her settlement and never look back. But even as she made the vow, she felt the lie in it. Because part of her, the part she didn't want to acknowledge, had felt something when Damien's hand touched her wrist. When his voice dropped low and intimate. When he'd admitted he'd wanted her for 2 years. Not affection. Not attraction. But something equally dangerous. Curiosity about the man who'd bought her, the beast who'd caged her, the predator who claimed to want her willing participation. "Don't mistake this for a fairy tale," he'd said on their first night. But fairy tales had beasts who became men. And Elena was beginning to wonder which version of Damien Cross was real, the monster who'd manipulated her family, or the man who'd spent 2 years watching her because he couldn't look away. She climbed into bed, pulled the covers to her chin, and stared at the ceiling. Sleep came eventually, fitful and dream-haunted. She woke at dawn to find a note slipped under her door. Heavy cardstock, his handwriting precise and controlled. Asterisk, the room is locked. The key is yours to keep or destroy. Your choice. Asterisk. E. Elena held the note, read it 3 times, then looked at her jewelry box where the brass key waited between her mother's pearls and her grandmother's ring. She should destroy it. Throw it away. Refuse to give him the satisfaction of knowing she might want access to his secrets. Instead, she tucked the note into the box beside the key and prepared to face her second day as Damien Cross's wife. Chapter 4. The Unraveling. Elena spent the morning avoiding Damien. She heard him leave for the office at 7, the elevator chime, the mechanical whisper of dissent, and only then emerged from her room. The penthouse felt different in his absence. Less suffocating but also less defined, as if his presence was what gave the space dimension. She made coffee, explored the kitchen cabinets with their minimal contents. Protein powder, expensive olive oil, a single box of pasta that looked decorative rather than functional. The refrigerator held prepared meals in glass containers, each labeled with heating instructions. Tuesday's delivery, she assumed. Evidence of a life lived entirely through delegation. The living room bookshelves drew her attention. She'd noticed them before but hadn't examined the contents. First editions, art monographs, philosophy texts in their original languages. Her fingers traced the spines. Nietzsche, Machiavelli, Sun Tzu. A collection that revealed more than he probably intended. One book sat slightly askew. Elena pulled it out. The Art of War, leather-bound, pages gilt-edged. Something fell from between the pages. Photograph. Not one from the locked room. This was older, creased with handling. A young boy, maybe 8, dark-haired and solemn, standing in front of a brick building. His clothes were too large, his expression too careful. On the back, written in faded pencil. Damien, St. Joseph's Home for Boys, 1992. Elena studied the child's face, tried to reconcile it with the man who'd engineered her captivity. The eyes were the same, dark, watchful, calculating survival. She tucked the photograph back into the book, returned it to the shelf. But the image stayed with her as she showered, dressed, tried to construct a routine from the wreckage of her life. Her phone buzzed. A text from her father. "How are you settling in?" Elena stared at the message. 3 days of marriage, and this was his first contact. She typed and deleted several responses before settling on. Asterisk, fine. The penthouse is beautiful. Asterisk. His reply came quickly. Damien treating you well? Like an acquisition he's pleased with, she wanted to write. Instead, yes. Asterisk, good. The company's stabilizing. You did the right thing, Elena. Asterisk. She set the phone down before she could throw it. By afternoon, restlessness drove her to the building's gym, a sleek space on the 40th floor, mostly empty at 2 p.m. Elena claimed a treadmill by the window and ran until her lungs burned, until thought dissolved into breath and movement. She was toweling off when her phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Cross. A woman's voice, professional and cool. "This is Dr. Sarah Chen from Manhattan Fertility Associates. I have you scheduled for a consultation tomorrow at 10 a.m. Mr. Cross's office made the appointment." Elena's hand tightened on the phone. "I didn't request an appointment." "No, your husband did. He was very specific about the urgency. Shall I confirm you for 10 a.m., or would you prefer a different time?" "I'll call back." Elena ended the call, pulse hammering. Fertility consultation. He'd scheduled it without asking, without discussing, as if her body was another asset to be managed on his timeline. She was still standing frozen when the elevator chimed. Damien emerged, loosening his tie, and stopped when he saw her. "You're here." Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. "I thought you'd be out." "Where would I go?" The question came sharper than intended. "I don't have friends in Tribeca. My life is in Brooklyn Heights, which feels like another country now." He moved closer, and she noticed the fatigue around his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "You can go anywhere you want. You're not a prisoner." "Aren't I?" Elena held up her phone. "Dr. Chen called. About the fertility consultation you scheduled. Without asking me." Damien's jaw tightened. "I was going to discuss it with you tonight. After you'd already made the appointment. After you'd decided my schedule." She stepped closer, anger overriding caution. "Do you understand how that feels? To have someone else controlling your body, your choices, your fucking medical appointments. I'm trying to be practical. You're trying to be controlling. There's a difference." She threw his words back at him. "The contract says I have a year. Not a month. Not whenever you decide it's convenient. A year. The sooner we start, the sooner you get what you want." "I understand." Elena moved toward the elevator. "Cancel the appointment." His hand caught her elbow. "Elena." She jerked away. "Don't touch me." The words hung between them, sharp and final. Damien's hand dropped, and she saw something flicker in his eyes. Hurt, quickly masked. "I'll cancel it," he said quietly. "I apologize for overstepping." The apology surprised her. Elena studied his face, looking for manipulation, but found only exhaustion. "Why are you pushing this?" "Because waiting makes it harder. Because the longer we avoid it, the more it becomes this insurmountable thing." He ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect order. "I'm trying to approach it pragmatically. Remove the emotional weight. It's my body. There's no removing the emotional weight." "I know." He looked at her, and for a moment the veneer cracked. "I'm not good at this. At considering someone else's feelings. Navigating intimacy. I've spent my entire adult life avoiding exactly this kind of complication. Then why insist on an heir? Why not just hire a surrogate?" "Because I wanted you." The admission came raw, unguarded. "Not just a child. Not just a wife. Bound to me. Connected to me in a way that couldn't be dissolved by paperwork." Elena's breath caught. "That's not romantic. That's possessive." "Yes." He moved closer and she let him. "I told you, I don't traffic in illusions. I want to possess you, Elena. Completely. And I want you to want it too. That will never happen." "Maybe not." His hand lifted, hovered near her face, then dropped. "But I have 11 months to try. And I'm very patient when I want something." The promise in his voice sent heat down her spine. Elena forced herself to step back. "Cancel the appointment. When I'm ready to discuss timeline, I'll let you know." "Agreed." Damien moved toward the elevator. "I have calls until 7. Dinner after." "I'm not hungry." "Elena." He stopped, hand on the elevator button. "We live together. We're married. We can't avoid each other for 11 months. Watch me." She turned away, headed for the stairs. His voice followed her. "You're stronger than you think. But you're also more afraid than you'll admit." Elena didn't respond. She took the stairs 2 at a time, fury and something else driving her upward. By the time she reached the penthouse level, her legs burned and her breath came ragged. Inside the apartment, she paced the living room, too agitated to sit. The locked room called to her from down the hall. All those photographs, all that evidence of his obsession. She should destroy the key. Refuse to engage with his madness. Instead, she found herself walking toward it. The key turned smoothly. The door opened. Elena stepped inside and turned on the lights. The photographs stared back, 100 versions of herself, captured and curated. But this time she looked at them differently. Not as evidence of violation, but as a map of his obsession. What had he seen in these moments? What had made him watch for 2 years? She moved to the desk, opened the files. Background check, financial records, medical history. Thorough, invasive, meticulous. The work of someone who left nothing to chance. Beneath the dossier on her, she found another folder. This one unlabeled, thicker. Elena opened it. Newspaper clippings. Court records. Social services reports. The systematic documentation of Damien Cross's childhood. Orphaned at 8 when his parents died in a car accident, no living relatives, bounced through foster homes for 8 years. The reports painted a picture of a child who'd learned early that survival meant self-sufficiency, that trust was a luxury he couldn't afford. One report made her pause. Asterisk subject displays exceptional intelligence but significant attachment difficulties. Recommended for therapeutic intervention. Asterisk. Another 2 years later. Asterisk Damien continues to resist emotional connection with foster families. Suggests he views relationships as transactional rather than affectional. Asterisk. Elena sat down slowly, the file open in her lap. The boy in the photograph, solemn, watchful, already calculating survival, had become the man who'd engineered her captivity. Not because he was a monster, but because he'd learned that wanting something meant taking it, that waiting for permission meant going without. She heard the elevator chime. Footsteps in the hallway. Then Damien's voice, sharp with alarm. "Elena!" He appeared in the doorway, still in his suit, and stopped when he saw her at his desk. "I thought you were." He trailed off, gaze moving from her face to the open file in her lap. "You're reading about me. Turnabout's fair play." Elena held up the file. "You documented my entire life. I'm just trying to understand yours." Damien moved into the room, but didn't approach the desk. "Those files are private. So were my movements, my coffee orders, my favorite bookstore." She set down the file. "You were 8 when your parents died." "Yes." "Foster care until 16." "Yes." "No permanent placement. No adoption. Just 8 years of temporary homes and people who didn't keep you." Elena watched his face, saw the careful blankness descend. "Is that why you need a contract? Because it's the only way you know how to bind someone to you. Don't." The word came sharp, warning. "Don't psychoanalyze me, Elena. You're not qualified, and I'm not interested in your amateur assessment. I'm trying to understand." "There's nothing to understand. I had a difficult childhood. I survived it. I built an empire. And yes, I learned that control is safer than vulnerability, that ownership is more reliable than affection." He moved to the desk, took the file from her hands. "Does that satisfy your curiosity?" "No." Elena stood, faced him across the desk. "Because it doesn't explain why you spent 2 years watching me. Why you engineered an entire crisis to acquire me. Why you need me specifically. I told you. You said you wanted me. But you could have approached me normally. Asked me to dinner. Tried to actually win me." She gestured to the photographs. "This isn't wanting someone. This is being terrified of rejection. Of asking and being refused." Damien's hands clenched on the file. "You don't know what you're talking about." "Don't I?" Elena moved around the desk, closing the distance between them. "You're brilliant at strategy, at manipulation, at controlling situations. But you're terrified of actually being vulnerable. of wanting something you can't guarantee you'll get. So you engineered a situation where I couldn't say no. Stop. Because if I'd had a real choice, I might have refused you. And you couldn't risk that. She was close enough now to see the muscle jumping in his jaw, the white-knuckled grip on the file. You're not a monster, Damien. You're just afraid. Enough. He slammed the file onto the desk, and Elena flinched. You want to understand me? Fine. Yes, I'm afraid. I'm afraid of wanting something I can't control. I'm afraid of caring about someone who could leave. I'm afraid of being that 8-year-old boy again, watching everyone walk away because I'm not worth staying for. The raw admission hung between them. Elena's breath caught. So yes, Damien continued, voice rough. I engineered your captivity. I created a situation where you were bound to me legally, financially, irrevocably. Because I wanted you and I couldn't risk you choosing someone else. I couldn't risk being refused. He looked at her, and the naked vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. Does that satisfy you? Does that make you feel better about hating me? Elena opened her mouth, closed it. The fury that had sustained her for days dissolved into something more complicated. Understanding, maybe, or the terrible recognition of shared damage. I don't hate you, she heard herself say. I hate what you've done. But I don't hate you. Damien's eyes searched hers. What's the difference? I'm still figuring that out. Elena moved to the wall of photographs, studied herself captured and catalogued. You said you wanted me willing. But you've made that impossible. Because every time I feel something, curiosity, attraction, even understanding, I remember that you manipulated me into this. That nothing about us is real. It's real. He moved behind her, close enough that she could feel his heat. Maybe it started with manipulation. But what I feel when I look at you, that's real. What I felt watching you at the Met 2 years ago, real. The way I want to touch you right now, and the way I'm stopping myself because you asked me not to, that's real too. Elena closed her eyes, felt his breath on her neck. You can't keep someone who doesn't want to be kept. I know. His voice dropped to a whisper. But I can try to make you want to stay. How? She turned, found him closer than expected. By scheduling my medical appointments. By controlling my life. By keeping me in a gilded cage. By being honest. By giving you space when you need it. By proving I'm capable of more than just possession. His hand lifted, hovered near her face. By earning you instead of just buying you. You can't earn someone you've already bought. Then I'll spend 11 months trying to prove you wrong. His fingers brushed her cheek, featherlight. I'm not good at this, Elena. Caring. At considering someone else's feelings. But I'm very good at learning. And I'm motivated. Despite herself, despite everything, Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, she wasn't ready for that. But curiosity about whether the beast could become a man. Whether the predator could learn to offer choice instead of control. Cancel the fertility appointment, she said quietly. Let me set the timeline. Done. And no more surveillance. No more tracking. No more files on my life. Agreed. And this room. Elena looked around at the photographs. Lock it. I don't want to see these again unless I choose to. Damien studied her face. But you want to keep the key. Yes. Why? Because she needed to know she could access his secrets. Could see the evidence of his obsession when the veneer became too convincing. Because the key was power and she had so little of it. Because it's mine, she said instead. My choice whether to use it. Something flickered in his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. Then it's yours. Along with whatever else you want from me. I want honesty. No more games. No more manipulation. I can't promise that. At her sharp look he continued. I can promise to try. But manipulation is how I've survived for 30 years. It's going to take more than a conversation to unlearn it. The honesty surprised her. Elena stepped back, creating distance. Then we have a problem. We have an opportunity. Damien moved to the door. To build something different than what we started with. It won't be conventional. Probably won't be healthy. But it might be real. Or it might be 11 months of hell. That too. He paused in the doorway. Dinner's in the refrigerator. I have work to finish. But Elena. She looked at him. Thank you. For trying to understand instead of just hating me. He left before she could respond. Elena stood alone in the room of photographs, surrounded by evidence of his obsession, and felt the careful architecture of her fury beginning to crack. She should hate him. She wanted to hate him. It would be so much simpler if she could just hate him. But the boy in the photograph, solemn, watchful, already learning that love was something other people had, made hate feel insufficient. Made her wonder if she was trapped in a cage with a monster, or just locked in a room with someone as damaged as she was. Elena turned off the lights, locked the door, and went to find dinner. They ate in silence, her at the island, him at the table, the space between them careful and deliberate. The prepared meal was excellent. Salmon, roasted vegetables, wild rice. Food designed by someone who understood nutrition but not comfort. How was your day? Damien asked. And the mundane question in this surreal situation almost made her laugh. I ran. I avoided you. I broke into your private office and psychoanalyzed your childhood trauma. Elena sipped her water. Pretty standard Tuesday. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. I had a board meeting. Fired a VP for embezzlement. Scheduled a fertility consultation without asking my wife. He met her eyes. Also pretty standard. We're quite a pair. We are. He set down his fork. I meant what I said. About trying. About being different. Actions, Damien. Not words. Agreed. He stood, collected his plate. I'll be in my office if you need anything. The door will be unlocked. Elena watched him go. Noted the deliberate offering of access, of trust. Small gesture but genuine. She finished her dinner alone, cleaned the kitchen, and retreated to her room. But sleep felt impossible. Her mind too full of photographs and files and the raw vulnerability in Damien's voice when he'd admitted his fear. At midnight, she gave up and went to the living room. The city sprawled beyond the windows, a universe of lights and lives. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried to imagine 11 more months of this. The careful distance, the charged proximity, the constant negotiation between captor and captive. Can't sleep. Damien's voice came from behind her. Elena turned. He stood in the hallway, barefoot, dress shirt untucked, looking more human than she'd ever seen him. Too much on my mind, she admitted. He moved to the window, maintained careful distance. Me too. They stood in silence, watching Manhattan breathe. Finally, Elena asked, what did you see? When you watched me at the Met 2 years ago. Damien was quiet for a long moment. Someone who was actually present. Everyone else was performing, seeing and being seen. But you were just there, looking at the art like it mattered. Like you weren't afraid to feel something real. And you wanted that. I wanted you. He turned his head, profile sharp against the city lights. I wanted someone who could feel things I couldn't. Who could be vulnerable in ways I'd forgotten how to be. I wanted. He trailed off. What? To learn how to be human again. Instead of just surviving. The confession settled over her like snow. Cold, quiet, transformative. Elena looked at his reflection in the window. Saw the boy and the man superimposed. I can't fix you, she said quietly. I'm not asking you to. I'm asking you to exist beside me. And maybe teach me how to exist beside you without trying to control everything. That's going to take more than 11 months. Then maybe we renegotiate the contract. He met her eyes in the reflection. Maybe we build something that doesn't have an expiration date. Elena's breath caught. You're getting ahead of yourself. Probably. He turned to face her fully. But I'm very good at long-term planning. And I'm patient when I want something. You keep saying that. Because it's true. His hand lifted, and this time she didn't flinch when his fingers brushed her cheek. You can hate me, Elena. But you're still mine for 11 more months. The words should have angered her. Instead, she felt heat curl low in her stomach, dangerous and unwelcome. Don't, she whispered. Don't what? Don't make me want this. Don't make me want you. His thumb traced her lower lip. Too late. Then he stepped back, breaking contact, leaving her breathless and furious and aching. Sleep well, Mrs. Cross. He walked away, and Elena stood alone at the window, touching her lip where his thumb had been, hating him and hating herself for not hating him enough. Chapter 5. The Thaw. Elena woke to silence, the specific quality of silence that meant she was alone in the penthouse. She checked her phone. 6:47 a.m. A text from Damien sent an hour ago. Asterisk early meeting. Back by noon. Coffee's programmed. Asterisk. She stared at the message, parsing it for subtext. No demands. No instructions. Just information, offered without expectation of response. Progress, maybe. Or strategy. The coffee was perfect. He'd programmed her preferences exactly. The realization unsettled her. He'd been paying attention, cataloging her habits even now. But the gesture felt different than the surveillance, less invasive than observant. Elena carried her mug to the living room windows. November had arrived overnight, the city wrapped in gray that promised rain. She pressed her palm against the glass, felt the cold seep through. 3 weeks of marriage. 21 days of careful distance and charged proximity, of negotiating the space between captor and captive. The fury that had sustained her was eroding into something more complicated. Not forgiveness, but understanding. Not acceptance, but curiosity about whether the beast could learn to be something else. Her phone buzzed. Another text from Damien. Asterisk forgot to mention. Package arriving today. For you. Asterisk. Elena frowned at the screen, typed back. What package? The response came immediately. You'll see. She should be annoyed by the evasion. Instead, she felt something uncomfortably close to anticipation. The package arrived at 10, a large box carried up by James, who smiled his practiced smile and retreated before she could ask questions. Elena set it on the dining table, studied the plain brown wrapping. No return address. No card. Just her name in Damien's precise handwriting. She opened it carefully, peeling back layers of tissue paper to reveal books. Not just any books. First editions, rare volumes, each one from her Amazon wishlist. Austen Bronte Wolfe. A collection she'd been building slowly, saving for, never quite able to justify the expense. At the bottom of the box. A note on heavy cardstock. Asterisk I noticed these in your browsing history. Before you accuse me of surveillance, I was looking for gift ideas, not tracking your movements. There's a difference. Asterisk. E. Asterisk P.S. The Wolf is signed. 1928. I thought you'd appreciate the provenance. Asterisk. Elena lifted the Wolf carefully, opened to the title page. Virginia Woolf's signature. Faded but unmistakable. Her hands trembled. This wasn't control. This was attention, the kind that required noticing what brought her joy, what mattered beyond the contract's requirements. The kind that suggested he was trying. She took a photo of the books, sent it to Damien. Asterisk they're beautiful. Thank you. Asterisk. His response came quickly. Asterisk you're welcome. Enjoy them. Asterisk. Then after a pause, I'm trying. Elena stared at those 2 words, felt something shift in her chest. No. She spent the morning reading Orlando, curled in the window seat she'd claimed as hers, losing herself in Woolf's prose. The rain started at 11, soft at first, then building to a steady percussion against the glass. The city blurred into impressionism, all gray and silver and the occasional bright slash of an umbrella. When Damien returned at noon, she was still reading. He stopped in the doorway, and she felt his presence before she looked up. Good book. His voice was carefully neutral. Extraordinary book. Elena marked her place. The inscription. Did you know it's to Vita Sackville West? Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or pleasure. I didn't. The dealer mentioned it was signed, but not to whom. Wolf's lover. Or one of them. Elena ran her fingers over the signature. It makes it even more valuable. Then I'm glad I bought it. He moved into the room, and she noticed the tension in his shoulders, the fatigue around his eyes. How was your morning? Quiet. Yours? Tedious. He loosened his tie, and the gesture felt intimate somehow, the small surrender of formality. Board meeting ran long. Everyone posturing, no one listening. Welcome to corporate America. Welcome to hell. He moved to the kitchen, poured water. Are you hungry? I can order lunch. The domesticity of the question struck her. They were talking like a normal couple, negotiating meals and schedules, finding a rhythm. When had that happened? I'm fine. I had toast earlier. Elena closed the book carefully. Damien. He turned, glass halfway to his lips. Thank you. For the books. For paying attention. His expression softened. You're welcome. I meant what I said. I'm trying. To be different. To be better. I can see that. They looked at each other across the space, and Elena felt the air thicken with something she didn't want to name. Not quite desire but close. Awareness, maybe. Recognition that they were locked in this together, and fighting it only made it harder. Damien broke the silence first. I have calls this afternoon. But tonight, would you have dinner with me? Not in separate rooms. Actually together. Like a date. Like two people who live together, trying to be civil. He paused. Or yes. Like a date if you prefer. Elena considered refusing, maintaining the distance that kept her safe. But safety was also loneliness, and she was tired of eating alone. Okay. Dinner together. Something lit in his eyes. Relief or victory or both. 7 o'clock. I'll cook. You cook. I have hidden depths, Mrs. Cross. He moved toward his office, then stopped. Wear something comfortable. This isn't a performance. He disappeared down the hall, and Elena sat with the signed wolf in her lap, wondering what she'd just agreed to. At 6:30, Elena stood before her closet, trying to decode comfortable. Not the blue gala dress, too formal. Not pajamas, too intimate. She settled on black jeans and a cashmere sweater, left her hair down, kept makeup minimal. When she emerged at 7, the penthouse smelled like garlic and wine. She followed the scent to the kitchen and stopped. Damien stood at the stove, sleeves rolled up, stirring something in a pan. He'd changed into dark jeans and a gray Henley. She'd never seen him in anything but suits. The casual clothes made him look younger, less armored. You're actually cooking. She moved closer, peered into the pan. Risotto. Mushroom and truffle. My one reliable dish. He added wine, and it hissed against the hot pan. I'm not a chef, but I can manage this. Where did you learn? Foster home number 3. Mrs. Chen, no relation to Victoria, believed idle hands were the devil's workshop. She taught me to cook, balance a checkbook, and change a tire. He stirred, focused on the risotto. She was kind. I stayed with her for 8 months before she got sick and couldn't keep me anymore. The casual mention of another abandonment made Elena's chest ache. Do you still talk to her? She died when I was 14. Cancer. He tasted the risotto, adjusted seasoning. I sent flowers to the funeral. The home wouldn't let me attend. I'm sorry. It was a long time ago. He ladled risotto into bowls, garnished with parmesan and fresh herbs. Dining table or counter? Counter. Less formal, less fraught. They sat side by side, and Elena took her first bite. The risotto was perfect. Creamy, rich, the truffle oil adding depth without overwhelming. This is excellent. Don't sound so surprised. But he looked pleased. I told you, hidden depths. They ate in companionable silence, the rain steady against the windows. Elena found herself relaxing, the constant vigilance easing. This felt almost normal. Two people sharing a meal, finding comfort in proximity. Tell me something, Damien said. Something I don't know. Something that's not in my files. Elena considered. I wanted to be an artist. Before my father needed me at Morgan Maritime, I was going to apply to graduate programs. Painting, specifically. Why didn't you? Because he needed help. Because the company was struggling even before Marcus's theft. Because duty mattered more than dreams. She set down her fork. I told myself I'd go back to it eventually. But eventually never came. Damien was quiet for a moment. The locked room. The one that's my office. What about it? It has north-facing windows. Perfect light for a studio. He met her eyes. If you wanted to paint again, it's yours. Elena's breath caught. You'd give up your office. I'd relocate my office. There's a difference. He stood, collected their bowls. I meant what I said about trying. About being different. If painting matters to you, then it matters. I don't have supplies. I haven't painted in years. Then we'll get supplies. And you'll practice until it comes back. He loaded the dishwasher with surprising competence. Unless you don't want to. In which case, forget I mentioned it. Elena studied him. The careful way he wasn't looking at her. The tension in his shoulders that suggested he was braced for rejection. He was offering her something real. Something that cost him nothing financially but required genuine sacrifice of his space, his control. I want to, she said quietly. I want to paint again. His shoulders relaxed. Then it's done. I'll have the room cleared by the weekend. Damien. She waited until he looked at her. Why are you doing this? Because I want you to have something that's yours. Something I didn't buy or engineer or control. He returned to the counter, leaned against it. Because I'm realizing that possession isn't the same as connection. And I want. He trailed off. What? I want you to choose to stay. Not because of the contract, not because of your family. Because you want to be here. With me. His voice dropped lower. Even if it takes the full 11 months. Even if it never happens. I want to earn it. The vulnerability in his admission made her chest tight. Elena slid off her stool, moved closer. Not touching, but near enough to feel his heat. You can't earn someone you've already bought, she said, echoing her earlier words. Then I'll spend the rest of the contract proving you wrong. He looked down at her, and the intensity in his gaze made her breath catch. I'm patient, Elena. And I'm motivated. You keep saying that. Because it's true. His hand lifted, hovered near her face. May I? The question, asking permission, offering choice, undid something in her. Elena nodded. His fingers brushed her cheek, featherlight, then traced her jaw. The touch was gentle, exploratory, as if he was memorizing her contours. Elena's eyes closed, and she felt her pulse hammer against his thumb. You're beautiful, he murmured. I don't tell you that enough. You've never told me that. Then I'm telling you now. His other hand found her waist, rested there without pulling her closer. You're beautiful and brilliant and stronger than you know. And I'm grateful you're here. Even if you hate me for it. I don't hate you. The admission came easier now. I hate what you did. But I don't hate you. What's the difference? Elena opened her eyes, found him close enough to count his eyelashes. I'm still figuring that out. His thumb brushed her lower lip, and she remembered last night. The same gesture, the same heat curling low in her stomach. But this time felt different. Less like possession, more like exploration. Tell me to stop, he said quietly. And I will. Elena knew she should. Knew that giving in to this, whatever this was, meant blurring lines that kept her safe. But safety was also loneliness. and she was tired of fighting the pull between them. "Don't stop." His eyes darkened. He leaned in slowly, giving her time to retreat to change her mind. When his lips brushed hers, the touch was soft, questioning. Elena's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palms. The kiss deepened gradually, his tongue tracing her lower lip, her fingers curling into his shirt. He tasted like wine and something darker, and when his hand tightened on her waist, Elena felt heat flood through her. Then the power cut out. The penthouse plunged into darkness. The kitchen appliances died with a collective sigh. Only the city lights beyond the windows provided illumination. Dim, insufficient, turning everything to shadows. Damien pulled back, hands still on her. "What?" "Building-wide outage." Elena's voice came breathless. "Happens sometimes in heavy rain." "Of course it does." His laugh was rough, frustrated. Perfect timing. Emergency lighting flickered on in the hallway, battery-powered strips that cast everything in sickly green. Elena stepped back, and his hands dropped reluctantly. "I should check the circuit breaker," he said. "Make sure it's not just this unit." "It's not. Look." She gestured to the windows, where other buildings showed dark patches. "Whole block is out." As if to emphasize the point, the elevator chimed, then went silent mid-descent. They both froze. "Is someone in there?" Elena moved toward the foyer. Damien followed, pulled out his phone, activated the flashlight. The elevator display showed it stopped between floors 39 and 40. "Emergency services," he said, already dialing. "They'll have someone here within." The phone went dead. He stared at the blank screen. Battery was at 60%. Elena checked hers. Also dead. The outage must have triggered some kind of electromagnetic pulse. Happens with older buildings sometimes. This building is 5 years old. Then we're just lucky. She moved to the elevator panel, pressed the emergency call button. Nothing. Backup power should kick in soon. Should. Usually does. In my experience. She met his eyes in the dim emergency lighting. "We might be stuck for a while." Damien looked at the dead elevator, the dark penthouse, then back at her. "Of course we are." 20 minutes later, they sat on the floor outside the elevator, backs against the wall, sharing the last of the wine by flashlight. The emergency lighting cast strange shadows, and the building was eerily quiet without its usual mechanical hum. "This is absurd," Elena said. "We finally have a civil conversation, share a kiss, and the universe decides to trap us in a blackout. The universe has a terrible sense of timing." Damien sipped wine from the bottle. They'd abandoned glasses as impractical. Or a perfect one, depending on your perspective. How is this perfect? We can't avoid each other. Can't retreat to separate rooms. We're stuck here, forced to actually talk. He offered her the bottle. "Maybe it's what we needed." Elena took it, drank. The wine was warm now, less elegant but more honest. "What do you want to talk about?" "Everything." "Nothing." "Whatever you're willing to share." He shifted, and his shoulder brushed hers. "Tell me about your mother." The question surprised her. "Why?" "Because you never mention her. Because you wear her pearls like armor. Because I want to know what made you who you are." Elena was quiet for a moment, weighing what to reveal. "She died when I was 16. Cancer like Mrs. Chen. It was fast. 6 months from diagnosis to funeral. My father. He never recovered. Threw himself into work, into saving the company, into anything but grief. And you. I learned to be strong. Take care of him. To put duty before everything else." She took another sip of wine. She would have hated this. The arranged marriage, the contract. She believed in love, in choosing your own path. "What would she think of me?" Elena considered. "She'd think you were damaged. And she'd probably try to fix you." "Can I be fixed?" "I don't know. Can you?" Damien was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know either. But I'm willing to try. For you." The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Elena felt something shift in her chest. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of something that might become it. "Tell me about your parents," she said. "Your real ones before the accident." "I barely remember them." His voice went distant. "My mother smelled like lavender. My father had calluses on his hands. He was a carpenter." They laughed a lot. "And then they were gone, and I was alone." "You were 8. Old enough to understand that love doesn't protect you. That people leave whether they want to or not. That the only person you can rely on is yourself." He took the wine bottle back, drank. "I built my entire life on that principle. Self-sufficiency. Control. Never needing anyone enough that their absence could destroy me. And then you saw me at the Met." "And then I saw you at the Met," he echoed. "And I wanted something I couldn't control. Someone who could leave. It terrified me. So you engineered a situation where I couldn't leave." "Yes." He looked at her, and the honesty in his eyes was almost painful. "I'm not proud of it. But I'd do it again because it's the only way I know how to keep something I want." Elena should be angry. Should remind him that possession wasn't love, that control wasn't connection. But sitting in the dark, sharing wine and confessions, she found herself understanding instead. "What if I choose to leave?" she asked quietly. "When the contract ends? What if I walk away?" Damien's jaw tightened. "Then I let you go. Because that's what you asked me to do. To earn you, not just buy you. And earning means respecting your choice, even if it destroys me." "Would it destroy you?" "Yes." The word came without hesitation. "Because I've spent 30 years not caring about anyone. Not letting anyone matter. And you've undone all of that in 3 weeks. You matter, Elena. Terrifyingly. Completely. And if you leave, I don't know how to go back to not caring." Elena's breath caught. This was more than strategy, more than manipulation. This was vulnerability, offered without armor, without guarantee of reciprocation. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she admitted. "When the contract ends. I don't know if I can forgive what you did. If I can trust you. If I can build something real with someone who bought me. I know." His hand found hers in the darkness, laced their fingers together. "But I have 11 months to prove I'm worth the risk. And I'm very patient when I want something." "You keep saying that. Because it's the truest thing I know." He squeezed her hand gently. "I want you, Elena. Not just your body, not just an heir. I want your thoughts, your laughter, your trust. I want to be someone you choose, not someone you're forced to endure. That's going to take more than gifts and gestures. I know. It's going to take time and consistency, and probably more vulnerability than I'm comfortable with." He brought her hand to his lips, pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "But I'm willing to be uncomfortable if it means earning you." Elena felt tears prick her eyes, not from sadness, but from the weight of his honesty, the risk he was taking by admitting he wanted something he couldn't control. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of me. Of this. Of wanting you back. Of forgetting why I should hate you." She looked at him, and the emergency lighting turned his face to planes and shadows. "Of falling for the beast and forgetting he's still capable of destroying me. Then don't forget." His free hand cupped her face. "Remember what I did. Remember that I'm capable of manipulation, of control, of engineering situations to get what I want. But also remember that I'm trying to be different. That I'm choosing vulnerability over control. That I'm asking instead of taking. For now. For as long as you'll let me." He leaned in, rested his forehead against hers. "I can't promise I'll never hurt you. I can't promise I'll always get it right. But I can promise I'll try. Every day. To be someone worthy of your choice." Elena closed her eyes, felt his breath on her lips, and made a decision. Not to trust him completely, she wasn't ready for that. But to stop fighting the pull between them. To see what happened when she let herself want him back. "Kiss me again," she whispered. His lips found hers in the darkness, soft at first, then deeper, more urgent. Elena's hands found his hair, pulled him closer, and felt his groan vibrate against her mouth. He tasted like wine and promises, and when his hand slid under her sweater, found bare skin, she arched into his touch. Elena. Her name was a prayer, a question. Tell me to stop. Don't stop. He pulled her into his lap, and she went willingly, straddling him, feeling his arousal press against her. His hands mapped her body, reverent, exploratory, as if he was memorizing her contours. When he kissed down her neck, Elena's head fell back, and she felt the world narrow to just this. His mouth, his hands, the heat building between them. Then the lights came on. The penthouse blazed to life. Overhead lights, appliances humming, the elevator chiming as it resumed operation. Elena blinked against the sudden brightness, disoriented. Damien's hands stilled on her waist. They stared at each other, breathing hard, the moment shattered by fluorescent reality. Of course, Elena said, and started to laugh. Damien joined her, the sound rusty but genuine. The universe really does have terrible timing. She climbed off his lap, and they both stood, adjusting clothes, trying to recover composure. The elevator doors opened, empty, waiting. I should. Elena gestured vaguely toward her room. Yes, of course. But Damien caught her hand before she could leave. Elena, what just happened? Was the blackout, and wine, and proximity. She met his eyes. But it was also real. And I'm not sorry. Something lit in his expression, hope or relief or both. Neither am I. But I need time. Process. To figure out what this means. Take all the time you need. He brought her hand to his lips again, kissed her palm. I'm patient, remember? Elena smiled despite herself. Good night, Damien. Good night, Elena. She retreated to her room, closed the door, and leaned against it. Her lips were swollen, her body still humming with want, her mind racing with implications. She'd kissed him, wanted him. Let herself imagine what might happen if she stopped fighting and started choosing. Terrified her. But it also felt like possibility, like maybe the beast could learn to be a man, like maybe she could learn to want her cage, like maybe they could build something real from the wreckage of his manipulation. Elena touched her lips, felt his kiss still there, and whispered to the empty room. What am I doing? No answer came. Just the city beyond her windows, indifferent and eternal. And the knowledge that somewhere down the hall, Damien was probably asking himself the same question. She changed into pajamas, climbed into bed, and lay awake replaying the evening. The risotto, the books, the blackout, the kiss. The way his hands had felt on her skin. The way her name sounded in his voice. The way vulnerability looked on a man who'd spent 30 years refusing it. Sleep came eventually, and with it, dreams of locked rooms and brass keys and Damien's voice saying, I'm trying to be someone worthy of your choice. When she woke in the morning, she found a note slipped under her door. Thank you for dinner. And for the conversation. And for not running when the lights came back on. The studio will be ready by Saturday. I hope you'll use it. E. Elena held the note, read it 3 times, then tucked it into her jewelry box beside the brass key and the photograph of the solemn boy who'd learned that wanting meant taking. But maybe, she thought, he was learning something different now. Maybe they both were. Chapter 6. The Breaking. The elevator descended in darkness, and Elena's breath came shallow. Not from fear of the confined space. From the memory of Damien's hands on her waist, his mouth on her neck, the way her body had responded before the lights returned and reality intruded. 2 days since the blackout. 48 hours of careful distance, charged glances across the breakfast counter, conversations that circled around what had happened without naming it. Now this, trapped again but differently. The elevator had lurched between floors, emergency brakes engaging with a metallic shriek that made her teeth ache. The backup lighting cast everything in red, turning Damien's face into a study of shadows. Are you all right? His hand found her elbow, steadying. Fine. Just startled. Elena pressed the emergency call button. Static crackled, then a voice. Technical difficulties. Crews dispatched. Approximately 30 minutes. The connection died. Damien checked his phone. No signal. The building's interfering. Of course it is. Elena leaned against the wall, tried to slow her pulse. At least we have light this time. And no wine. His mouth curved, not quite a smile. We'll have to stay sober for this conversation. What conversation? The one we've been avoiding since the blackout. He moved closer, and the elevator suddenly felt smaller. About what happened. What it meant. Elena's hands clenched at her sides. It meant we were trapped and vulnerable, and we made a choice in the moment. Is that all it was? I don't know. The honesty escaped before she could stop it. I don't know what it was, Damien. I don't know what this is. I don't know how to want someone who engineered my captivity. Then don't want me. His voice was quiet, dangerous. Keep hating me. Keep fighting this. But stop pretending that kiss was just proximity and wine. What do you want me to say? Elena pushed away from the wall, faced him. That I'm attracted to you. That I think about your hands on me. That I lie awake wondering what would have happened if the lights hadn't come back on. Yes. He moved closer, and she could smell his cologne now. Cedar and something darker. Say all of that. Be honest about what you feel instead of what you think you should feel. I feel confused. And angry. And terrified that I'm falling for the man who bought me. Her voice cracked. Is that honest enough? Damien's expression shifted. Something raw and unguarded moving across his face. You're falling for me. I didn't say that. You did. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. You said you're terrified of falling for me. Which means you're already halfway there. Elena wanted to deny it, to retreat behind anger and self-protection. But the red emergency lighting and the confined space stripped away her defenses. What if I am? What does that change? Everything. He leaned in, rested his forehead against hers. Because I've been falling since I saw you at the Met 2 years ago. And I'm terrified too. Of what? That you'll leave when the contract ends. That I'll have proven I'm capable of more than possession, and you'll still choose to walk away. That I'll have learned how to be vulnerable, and it won't be enough. His voice dropped to a whisper. That I'll finally understand what love is, and lose it anyway. Elena's breath caught. You don't love me. Don't I? His thumb traced her lower lip. What else do you call wanting someone so much you engineer their captivity? Spending 2 years watching them because you can't look away. Trying to become a better person because they asked you to. Obsession. Control. Possession. Those two. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But also love. Damaged, dysfunctional, probably unhealthy love. But love nonetheless. The admission hung between them, terrifying and transformative. Elena's hands found his chest, felt his heart hammering beneath her palms. You can't love someone you've bought. Watch me. His hands slid to her waist, pulled her closer. I love the way you look at art like it matters. I love your strength, your fury, the way you refuse to be broken. I love that you see the beast and the man and you're trying to understand both. I love. She kissed him to stop the words, to silence the vulnerability that was breaking her careful defenses. His response was immediate. Hands tightening on her waist, mouth opening under hers, a groan that vibrated through her chest. The kiss was different than the blackout, less exploratory, more desperate. Elena's fingers tangled in his hair, and when his hands slid under her blouse, found bare skin, she arched into his touch. Elena. Her name was rough, needy. Tell me to stop. Don't stop. She pulled him closer, felt his arousal press against her. Don't you dare stop. His mouth moved to her neck, teeth scraping sensitive skin. Elena's head fell back against the elevator wall, and she felt the world narrow to sensation. His hands mapping her body. His lips marking her throat, the heat building between them. I want you. His voice was raw against her ear. "I've wanted you for so long. Let me." The elevator lurched. Once, twice. Then began moving upward with a mechanical groan. They sprang apart, breathing hard, as the car climbed toward the penthouse level. "Fuck." Damien ran a hand through his hair, disrupting its perfect order. "That's twice now." Elena adjusted her blouse with shaking hands. "The universe is sending a message." "What message?" "That we should think before we." The elevator chimed, doors opening onto the penthouse foyer. Elena stepped out quickly, needing distance. "Before we make this more complicated." Damien followed, caught her wrist. "It's already complicated. We're married. We're living together. We're falling for each other. How much more complicated can it get? We could consummate the marriage. Fulfill the HEIR clause. Blur every remaining boundary until I can't tell what's real and what's contract." She pulled away from his grip. "That's how much more complicated. Would that be so terrible?" He moved closer, and she retreated until her back hit the wall beside her bedroom door. "To stop fighting this. To see what happens when we both choose it. I don't know if I'm choosing it or just surrendering to it." Elena's voice came out breathless. "There's a difference. Then choose." His hands pressed against the wall on either side of her head, caging her without touching. "Right now. No contract, no obligations. Just you and me. Do you want this?" Elena looked up at him. At the intensity in his dark eyes, the tension in his jaw, the vulnerability he was offering despite the risk. She thought about the books he'd bought, the studio he was building, the way he'd admitted he was falling for her. She thought about the photographs in the locked room, the manipulation that had brought her here, the fact that he'd engineered her captivity because he couldn't risk being refused. Beast and man superimposed. Damage and desire intertwined. "Yes." The word escaped before she could stop it. "I want this. I want you. Even though I shouldn't. Even though it's probably a mistake. Even though." He kissed her, swallowing the rest of her doubts. His hands found her face, held her like she was precious, like she was something more than an acquisition. Elena melted into him, let herself feel without analyzing, want without questioning. When he pulled back, they were both breathing hard. "My room or yours?" His voice was rough with need. Elena's hand found the doorknob behind her. "Mine. So I can kick you out if I change my mind." "Fair enough." He followed her inside, and she heard the door close with a soft click. Her room looked different with him in it. Smaller, more intimate. The bed suddenly seemed enormous, a landscape of possibility and consequence. Elena turned to face him, and the weight of what they were about to do settled over her. "I'm scared," she admitted. "So am I." He moved closer, hands gentle on her waist. "We can stop. Right now. Go back to careful distance and charged glances. Pretend this didn't happen. Could you? Pretend." "No." His thumb traced her lower lip. "But I'd try if that's what you needed." Elena studied his face, looking for manipulation, for strategy. Found only honesty and want and the vulnerability of a man who'd spent 30 years refusing to need anyone. "I don't want to pretend." She reached up, began unbuttoning his shirt. "I want to see what happens when we stop fighting this." His hands covered hers, stilling them. "Elena, you need to understand, if we do this, I won't be able to go back. I won't be able to maintain distance. I'll want more. I'll want everything." "I know." She resumed unbuttoning, pushed the shirt off his shoulders. "That's what scares me." His chest was exactly as she'd imagined. Lean muscle, a few scars she wanted to ask about, skin warm under her palms. She traced the line of his collarbone, felt his breath hitch. "You're beautiful," she whispered. "That's my line." His hands found the hem of her blouse, paused. "May I?" The question, still asking permission, still offering choice, undid her. Elena lifted her arms, let him pull the blouse over her head. His eyes darkened as he took her in, and she fought the urge to cover herself. "You're perfect." His fingers traced her collarbone, the swell of her breasts above her bra. "I've imagined this so many times. You're even more beautiful than I dreamed. Show me." Elena's hands found his belt, began unbuckling. "Show me what you imagined." He groaned, captured her mouth again. The kiss was deeper now, more urgent, and when his hands found the clasp of her bra, she didn't stop him. The fabric fell away, and his palms cupped her breasts, thumbs brushing her nipples until she gasped against his mouth. "Bed," he murmured. "Now." They stumbled backward, shedding clothes between kisses. By the time they reached the bed, Elena was down to her underwear, and Damien wore only his boxer briefs. She could see his arousal straining against the fabric, and heat pooled low in her stomach. He laid her down gently, covered her body with his. The weight of him felt right, anchoring. When he kissed down her neck, across her collarbone, she arched into him. "Tell me what you want," he murmured against her skin. "Ooh. Just you." Her hands found his shoulders, pulled him closer. "Stop asking permission and just." His mouth closed over her nipple, and the words dissolved into a moan. Elena's fingers tangled in his hair as he lavished attention on her breasts, teeth scraping sensitive skin, tongue soothing the sting. When his hand slid lower, cupped her through her underwear, she nearly came apart. "So responsive." His voice was rough with approval. "I want to learn every sound you make. Every place that makes you gasp." He hooked his fingers in her underwear, slid it down her legs. Elena felt exposed, vulnerable, and when his hand returned to cup her bare, she trembled. "Beautiful," he breathed, and then his fingers were exploring, finding her wet and ready. "God, Elena. You're—" Her phone rang. They both froze. The sound was jarring, intrusive, shattering the moment. Elena reached for the nightstand, saw her father's name on the screen. "Don't answer it," Damien said, his hand still between her legs. "I have to." She sat up, and he withdrew reluctantly. "He never calls unless it's important," she answered, trying to steady her breathing. "Dad." "Elena." His voice sounded strange, tight, angry. "We need to talk. Now." "What's wrong?" "I just got a call from Marcus Webb's attorney. Apparently, Damien threatened him. Told him to keep quiet about the embezzlement or face additional charges." Her father's voice shook. "Elena, the marriage. It wasn't to save the company. It was to acquire you. He engineered the entire crisis." The words hit like a physical blow. Elena looked at Damien, saw him tense, saw the guilt flicker across his face before the mask descended. "Dad, I'll call you back." She ended the call with numb fingers. "Elena. Is it true?" Her voice sounded distant, clinical. "Did you threaten Marcus?" Damien sat up slowly, and she noticed him reaching for his discarded clothes. Armor, protection. "Yes. To keep him quiet about the embezzlement." "Yes. So my father wouldn't know you'd engineered the crisis." "Yes." He pulled on his boxer briefs, his jeans. "But it's more complicated than." "No." Elena stood, grabbed her robe from the chair, wrapped it around herself. "It's actually very simple. You manipulated the situation to force my hand. You threatened witnesses to keep your manipulation secret. And you let me believe I had a choice when you'd already made sure I had none. You did have a choice. Based on false information. Based on a crisis you created." Her voice cracked. "I asked you to be honest. I asked you to stop manipulating. And you looked me in the eye and promised to try. I am trying. You're trying to hide your crimes. There's a difference." She moved to the door, opened it. "Get out." Damien stood, shirt in hand, and she saw the desperation in his eyes. "Elena, please. Let me explain." "Explain what?" "That you're still the same man who bought me. That nothing's changed except you've gotten better at hiding it." Tears burned her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "Get out." "I love you." The words came raw, broken. I know you don't believe me, but I love you. Everything I've done. Everything you've done has been about control. About possession. About making sure I couldn't leave. Elena's voice shook. That's not love, Damien. That's obsession. And I was a fool to think it could be anything else. He moved toward her and she stepped back. Don't touch me. Don't look at me like that. Just leave. For a moment she thought he'd refuse. Thought he'd push past her defenses, use his words and his touch to break her resolve. But instead he pulled on his shirt, buttoned it with careful precision and walked to the door. He stopped in the threshold, looked back. I meant what I said. About falling for you. About wanting to earn you instead of just buying you. I know you don't believe me now, but you're right. I don't believe you. Elena's hands clenched on the robe. Because if you loved me, you would have told me the truth. You would have given me real choice. You wouldn't have kept manipulating even while promising to change. I was protecting you. From the truth. From making an informed decision. She laughed, sharp and bitter. That's not protection, Damien. That's control. And I'm done being controlled. He flinched like she'd struck him. What are you saying? I'm saying I want out. I want to void the contract, return the money, end this farce. Elena forced herself to meet his eyes. I'm saying I choose to leave. The words hung between them, final, irrevocable. Damien's face went carefully blank, and she watched him retreat behind his walls, the vulnerability disappearing beneath corporate armor. You can't void the contract without 90 days' notice. And your father can't return the money. Morgan Maritime doesn't have the liquidity. His voice was cold now, controlled. You're bound to me for 11 more months whether you want to be or not. Then I'll endure it. But I won't pretend anymore. I won't have dinner with you, or kiss you, or let myself believe you're capable of being anything other than what you are. Elena's voice steadied. You wanted honesty. Here it is, I hate you. I hate what you've done. And I hate that I almost fell for the lie that you could be different. She saw the words land, saw him absorb the impact. For a moment, his mask cracked, and she glimpsed the damage beneath. The boy who'd learned that wanting meant losing, who'd built walls so high that vulnerability felt like death. Then the mask returned, seamless and impenetrable. Understood. He moved into the hallway. I'll have my attorney draw up a formal separation agreement. You'll have your own room, your own space. I won't bother you again. Good. He walked away, and Elena closed the door before she could watch him go. She locked it, knowing it was futile, knowing he had keys, and leaned against the wood. Only then did she let herself cry. She woke at dawn to silence. The penthouse felt empty, though she knew Damien was somewhere in it. Probably in his office, behind his locked door, rebuilding the walls she'd briefly seen him lower. Elena showered, dressed in her most severe suit, armor for the day ahead. When she emerged, she found a note on the kitchen counter. Asterisk separation agreement attached. You'll have full access to the penthouse, separate bedroom, no obligation to appear at social functions. I'll arrange for a studio space in the building, not the locked room, somewhere that's entirely yours. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm sorry. For the manipulation. For the lies. For making you believe I could be someone I'm not. Asterisk. Asterisk, you have 11 months. I won't make them harder than they need to be. Asterisk. E. Elena read it twice, looking for subtext for manipulation. Found only resignation and something that looked like grief. She should feel victorious. She'd stood her ground, refused to be controlled, chosen herself over the beast who'd caged her. Instead she felt hollow. Her phone rang. Her father. Elena. I'm so sorry. I should have seen it sooner, should have protected you. It's not your fault, Dad. She poured coffee with steady hands. I made the choice to sign. I have to live with it. But if I'd known he was manipulating the situation, would it have changed anything? We still needed the money. I still would have signed. Elena sat at the counter, watched Manhattan wake beyond the windows. At least now I know what I'm dealing with. I'm returning the money. I don't care if it bankrupts us. You're not staying in that marriage. You can't return what you've already spent. And I'm not asking you to. She took a breath. I signed the contract. I'll honor it. 11 months and then I'm free. Elena. I have to go, Dad. I'll call you later. She ended the call before he could argue. The penthouse was silent except for the mechanical hum of expensive appliances. Elena finished her coffee, rinsed the cup, and stood in the empty kitchen trying to figure out what to do with a day that stretched ahead like a prison sentence. A door opened down the hall. A step. Then Damien appeared in the kitchen doorway, already dressed in his suit, already armored. They looked at each other across the space, and Elena saw the distance between them. Not just physical, but emotional, the careful walls rebuilt and reinforced. I'm leaving for the office, he said, voice neutral. I'll be back late. There's food in the refrigerator. Thank you. The studio space. I'll have it ready by next week. If you still want it. I do. He nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. Elena. What I said last night. About falling for you. About loving you. That wasn't manipulation. That was the truth. It doesn't matter. She forced herself to hold his gaze. Because you still chose control over honesty. You still chose to manipulate rather than trust me with the truth. And that tells me everything I need to know about what you're capable of. You're right. He moved toward the elevator. I'm sorry. For all of it. Then he was gone, and Elena stood alone in the kitchen, wondering why victory felt so much like loss. She spent the day exploring the building, the gym, the roof deck, the library on the 15th floor. Anywhere but the penthouse. Anywhere she wouldn't feel his absence like a physical presence. When she finally returned at dusk, she found the locked room open. Inside, empty walls where the photographs had been, the desk cleared, nothing remaining of his obsession except the memory of it. On the desk, a single note. Asterisk, the key is yours. The room is yours. Everything I have is yours if you want it. Asterisk. Elena stood in the empty room and felt something crack in her chest. Not quite forgiveness, but the recognition that he was trying, even now, even after she'd rejected him. She locked the door, kept the key, and went to her room. That night, she lay awake listening for footsteps that never came, for the sound of him checking on her, for any sign that he was still there despite the distance she'd demanded. But the penthouse remained silent, and Elena realized she'd gotten exactly what she'd asked for. Separation, space, freedom from his presence. Felt nothing like victory. It felt like the beginning of the longest 11 months of her life. Chapter 7, The Choice. Elena's father arrived at noon, unannounced. She heard the elevator chime, then his voice in the foyer, tight with anger, rough with something that might have been guilt. Where is he? Office. Elena set down her coffee, moved to intercept him before he could storm down the hallway. Dad, don't. Richard Morgan's face was flushed. His usually impeccable suit rumpled. He looked like he'd aged a decade in 3 days. That bastard manipulated us both. Threatened witnesses. Engineered your captivity. And you want me to do nothing. I want you to let me handle it. Elena caught his arm, felt him trembling. Please. This is my marriage, my choice. Choice. He pulled away. You had no choice. He made sure of that. The truth of it settled over them both. Elena gestured toward the living room. Sit. Let me explain. They sat on opposite ends of the white sofa. Expensive, uncomfortable, designed for display rather than comfort. Like everything else in Damien's world. Marcus Webb called me this morning, Richard said. Said Damien's attorneys contacted him 6 months ago. Offered him immunity if he'd cooperate with the embezzlement investigation. But only if he kept quiet about Damien's involvement in exposing it. Elena's hands clenched in her lap. So Damien did save us from criminal charges. By creating the crisis in the first place. Her father's voice cracked. He let us drown, Elena. Watched us struggle. Waited until we were desperate enough that you'd sign anything. I know. The words came out flat. He told me. In his own way. He's never pretended to be anything other than what he is. A predator. A damaged man who learned that control is safer than vulnerability. Elena looked at her father, saw the guilt etched in every line of his face. He's not the villain here, Dad. Or not the only one. Richard flinched. You're defending him. I'm trying to understand him. There's a difference. She stood, moved to the windows. Manhattan sprawled below, indifferent. You want to know the worst part? I was falling for him. For the version of him that bought me books and built me a studio and admitted he was terrified of losing me. Elena. And then I found out he was still manipulating. Still controlling. Still making sure I couldn't leave even while promising to earn me instead of just buying me. Her voice steadied. So yes, he's a predator. But I'm also a fool for believing he could be anything else. Her father joined her at the window. I'm returning the money. I don't care what it costs. You can't. You've already spent most of it on debt service and operations. Elena kept her gaze on the city. And I won't let you destroy the company to save me from a situation I chose. You didn't choose this. I signed the contract. I walked into that courthouse. I said, I do. She finally looked at him. Yes, he manipulated the circumstances. But I still made the choice. And I have to live with it. For 11 months. For 11 months. Elena moved away from the window, from the weight of his guilt. Then I'm free. And I'll take my settlement and build a life that's actually mine. What about now? You can't stay here living with him. I'm not living with him. We have a separation agreement. Separate rooms, separate lives. No obligations beyond the contract's basic requirements. She forced a smile. It's fine, Dad. I'm fine. But the lie tasted like ash, and they both knew it. After her father left, reluctantly, still radiating impotent fury, Elena retreated to her room. The separation agreement sat on her dresser, 43 pages of legalese that formalized their distance. She'd signed it 2 days ago, and Damien had countersigned without comment. Now they were married strangers, bound by contract but separated by choice. Her choice. So why did it feel like punishment? Elena changed into running clothes, took the elevator to the gym. The space was empty at 2 p.m., just her and the machines and the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Hudson. She claimed a treadmill and ran until her lungs burned, until thought dissolved into breath and movement. She was toweling off when her phone buzzed. Unknown number. Mrs. Cross. This is Victoria Chin. Do you have a moment? Elena's stomach tightened. What do you want? To apologize. Victoria's voice was crisp, professional. For leaving the key in your belongings. Damien specifically instructed me not to. And I violated his trust. I'm sorry. Why did you do it? Because I thought you deserved to know what you were getting into. Who you'd married. I thought. Victoria exhaled. I thought if you saw the photographs, you'd understand the depth of his obsession and protect yourself accordingly. Instead, I fell for him anyway. The admission escaped before Elena could stop it. Did you? Victoria's tone shifted, less professional, more curious. Or did you fall for the idea of him? The version he was trying to become. Elena sat down on a bench, legs suddenly unsteady. Is there a difference? I don't know. I've worked for Damien for 8 years. I've watched him destroy competitors, acquire companies, build an empire from nothing. And I've never seen him vulnerable. Never seen him try to be different. Victoria paused. Until you. He's still manipulating. Of course he is. It's what he knows. What he's good at. Victoria's voice gentled. But he's also trying. Failing clearly. But trying. That has to count for something. Why are you telling me this? Because he's miserable. Because he's been locked in his office for 3 days. And I've never seen him like this. Because whatever you think of him, whatever he's done, he meant it when he said he was falling for you. Victoria cleared her throat. I'm not asking you to forgive him. Just consider that people can be both terrible and trying, both damaged and desperate to change. The call ended before Elena could respond. She sat in the empty gym, staring at her phone, feeling the careful architecture of her anger begin to crack. She returned to the penthouse at dusk. The space was silent, but she felt Damien's presence, a light under his office door, the faint sound of typing. He was there, separated by walls and choices, close enough to feel but too far to reach. Elena made dinner from the prepared meals. Salmon, roasted vegetables, food designed by someone who understood nutrition but not comfort. She ate at the counter, alone, watching night fall over Manhattan. Her phone buzzed. A text from Damien. Asterisk, the studio space is ready. 10th floor, unit 1042. Key is on the foyer table. Use it whenever you want. Asterisk. Elena stared at the message, typed and deleted several responses. Finally settled on, thank you. His reply came immediately, you're welcome. Then after a pause. Asterisk, I'm sorry. For everything. Asterisk. Elena set down her phone before she could respond. The apology felt genuine, but apologies didn't erase manipulation. Didn't change the fact that he'd threatened witnesses to keep his crimes hidden. Didn't undo the cage he'd built around her. But Victoria's words echoed. People can be both terrible and trying. Elena cleaned the kitchen, then found herself walking down the hallway. Past her room, past the master suite, door closed, light seeping beneath, to the locked room at the end. She fitted the key into the lock, turned it, stepped inside. The room was exactly as she'd left it. Empty walls, cleared desk, no evidence of his obsession except the memory. But on the desk she found something new. A folder thick with documents. Elena opened it. Inside, the complete file on Marcus Webb's embezzlement. Bank statements, wire transfers, emails. Every piece of evidence Damien had used to expose the theft. And beneath that, another document. A legal brief from Damien's attorneys, dated 6 months ago, outlining their strategy for protecting Morgan Maritime from criminal liability. He'd been planning her family's protection long before the crisis reached its peak. Long before he'd made his offer. Elena sank into the desk chair, reading through the documents with growing understanding. Yes, he'd waited. Yes, he'd let the situation deteriorate. But he'd also been building a case, ensuring that when he intervened, her family would be shielded from prosecution. Predator and protector superimposed. At the bottom of the folder, a handwritten note on heavy cardstock. Asterisk, I know this doesn't excuse what I did. Doesn't change that I manipulated you, controlled the situation, made sure you'd have no choice but to sign, asterisk. Asterisk, but I want you to know. I would have protected your family regardless. Even if you'd refused me. Even if you'd walked away. The criminal case was already built. Your father was already safe, asterisk. Asterisk, I didn't tell you because I wanted you bound to me. Because I was terrified you'd refuse if you knew you had a real choice. Because I'm exactly what you said. Damaged, controlling, incapable of offering vulnerability without guarantees. Asterisk. Asterisk, you were right to choose separation. Right to demand distance. Right to protect yourself from someone who's still learning how to be human. Asterisk. Asterisk, but you were wrong about one thing. I do love you. Imperfectly. Obsessively. In ways that probably aren't healthy. But real nonetheless. Asterisk. Asterisk, I'm not asking for forgiveness. Just understanding that I'm trying. Failing. But trying. Asterisk. Elena read the note 3 times, hands shaking. Then she stood, walked down the hallway to his office, and knocked. Silence. Then, come in. She opened the door. Damien sat at his desk, laptop open, papers scattered. He looked exhausted, shirt wrinkled, tie discarded, shadows under his eyes. When he saw her, something flickered in his expression before the mask descended. Elena. Do you need something? I read the file. She moved into the room, closed the door behind her. The one you left in the locked room. His jaw tightened. I wanted you to understand that you were protecting us, that you'd already built the criminal case, that my father was safe regardless of whether I signed. Elena moved closer, saw him tense. Why didn't you tell me? Because I wanted you bound to me. Because knowing you had a real choice meant risking you'd refuse me. Because you're terrified of vulnerability. She stopped at the edge of his desk. I know. You've said it. Multiple times. But Damien, that file. That protection. You did that before you ever made your offer. Before you knew if I'd sign. Yes. So you would have saved my family anyway. Even if I'd walked away. Yes. He stood, moved to the window. I couldn't let them face criminal charges. Not when I could prevent it. Not when. He trailed off. When what? When it would have destroyed you. He turned, and the vulnerability in his eyes made her breath catch. I've spent 2 years watching you. I know what your family means to you. I know losing them would break something essential in you. And I couldn't be the reason for that. Even if it meant losing my leverage. Elena felt something shift in her chest. You chose to protect me over guaranteeing my compliance. I chose to protect you. Period. His voice was rough. The marriage offer was separate. Selfish. A way to bind you to me while convincing myself I was doing you a favor. But the criminal case. That was always about keeping you safe. Even from the consequences of my own manipulation. The admission hung between them, raw and honest. Elena moved around the desk, closing the distance. You're an idiot, she said quietly. Damien's mouth curved, not quite a smile. I'm aware. You could have told me. Could have shown me that file from the beginning. Could have proven you were capable of protecting without possessing. I know. Instead you hid it. Let me believe the worst. Chose control over trust. Elena stopped in front of him, close enough to see the exhaustion etched in every line of his face. Why? Because I'm still learning. Still failing. Still terrified that offering choice means losing you. He looked down at her, and the naked fear in his eyes made her chest ache. I'm trying, Elena. But I don't know how to do this. How to want someone without trying to own them. How to love without controlling. You start by being honest. Even when it costs you. She reached up, touched his face. Even when it means risking rejection. His hand covered hers, held it against his cheek. I'm being honest now. Love you. Want you. And I'm terrified that even if I do everything right, you'll still leave when the contract ends. Maybe I will. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. Maybe I can't forgive what you did. Maybe the damage is too deep. Maybe. I know. His other hand found her waist, rested there without pulling her closer. I know all of that. But I have 11 months to prove I'm worth the risk. And I'm very patient when I want something. Despite everything, Elena smiled. You keep saying that. Because it's the truest thing I know. He leaned down, rested his forehead against hers. Tell me what you need. Space. Time. Complete separation. I'll give you whatever you ask for. I need honesty. No more hiding. No more manipulation, even when you think it's for my own good. Done. And I need you to understand, I'm not promising anything. Not forgiveness. Not staying. Not falling in love with you. Lena's voice shook. I'm just trying to understand if the beast can become a man. Or if I'm a fool for believing it's possible. You're not a fool. His thumb traced her cheekbone. You're brave. Braver than I've ever been. Brave enough to see the damage and still try to understand it. Or stupid enough to think I can fix you. You can't fix me. I have to fix myself. He pulled back enough to meet her eyes. But maybe you can teach me how. How to be vulnerable without guarantees. How to want without controlling. How to love someone enough to let them choose. Elena studied his face, looking for manipulation, for strategy. Found only exhaustion and hope, and the terrible vulnerability of wanting something he couldn't guarantee. The separation agreement, she said quietly. Do you want to void it? I want whatever you're comfortable with. His hand tightened on her waist. If you need distance, I'll give you distance. If you want to try again, I'll try. If you want to spend the next 11 months in separate rooms and walk away when it's over, I'll accept that too. What do you want? Ooh. In every way. Completely. Forever. The honesty was brutal. But I'll settle for whatever you're willing to give. Elena closed her eyes, felt his breath on her face, and made a decision. Not to trust him completely. She wasn't ready for that. But to stop fighting the pull between them. To see what happened when they both chose honesty over strategy. I want to try, she whispered. To see if we can build something real from the wreckage of your manipulation. But Damien, if you lie to me again, if you manipulate me again, if you choose control over honesty one more time, I'm done. Contract or no contract. I'll find a way to leave. Understood. His arms wrapped around her, pulled her close. Thank you. For giving me another chance. For being brave enough to try. Elena buried her face in his chest. Felt his heart hammering beneath her cheek. I'm terrified. So am I. His lips pressed against her hair. But maybe that's how we know it's real. They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other, breathing together, finding comfort in proximity. Finally, Elena pulled back. I should go. Let you finish working. Stay. His hand caught hers. Please. I've missed you. These past 3 days. Have been hell. Have been a reminder of what I'll lose if I don't get this right. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her palm. Faye, we don't have to talk. We don't have to do anything. Just be here. Elena knew she should maintain distance, should protect herself from getting hurt again. But the loneliness of the past 3 days, the hollow victory of separation, made her ache for connection. Okay. I'll stay. She settled into the chair across from his desk while he returned to work. They existed in companionable silence. Him typing, her reading on her phone, both of them aware of the other's presence. Felt almost normal. Almost like a real marriage. At 10, Damien closed his laptop. I'm done. Are you hungry? Starving, actually. They raided the refrigerator together. Assembled a makeshift meal of cheese, crackers, fruit. Ate standing at the counter, passing the wine bottle between them, talking about nothing important. Her plans for the studio, his frustrating board meeting, the weather forecast. Domestic. Easy. Real. When they finished, Elena rinsed the dishes while Damien put away the food. The choreography felt natural, practiced, like they'd been doing this for years instead of days. Thank you, Damien said as she dried her hands. For staying. For trying. For being brave enough to give me another chance. Don't thank me yet. I might still decide you're irredeemable. But she smiled as she said it. Fair enough. He moved closer and she let him. Can I ask you something? Depends on the question. The night of the blackout. Before your father called. If we hadn't been interrupted. He stopped, seemed to recalibrate. Would you have regretted it? Elena considered the question, weighed honesty against self-protection. I don't know. Maybe. Probably. She met his eyes. But I also would have wanted it. Which is its own kind of terrifying. Why? Because wanting you means giving you power to hurt me. And you've already proven you're willing to use that power. She touched his chest, felt his heart hammering. But I'm trying to believe you can be different. That you can want without controlling. That you can love without possessing. I'm trying to. His hand covered hers, held it against his heart. Every day. To be someone worthy of your trust. Someone who deserves your choice. Then prove it. Elena stepped back, creating distance. Not with gestures or gifts. With honesty. With consistency. With choosing my agency over your control. Even when it scares you. I will. He let her go, didn't try to hold on. Starting now. What do you need? Time. Faith. The freedom to change my mind without consequences. She moved toward the door. And honesty. Always honesty. Even when it costs you. You have all of that. And anything else you need. He followed her to the hallway. Good night, Elena. Good night, Damien. She went to her room, closed the door, and stood in the darkness trying to process what had just happened. She'd chosen to try again. To give him another chance. To see if the beast could become a man. Terrified her. But it also felt like possibility, like maybe they could build something real from the wreckage of his manipulation. Like maybe honesty could be the foundation for something that resembled love. Elena changed into pajamas, climbed into bed, and lay awake listening to the penthouse breathe. Down the hall, she heard Damien's door open, close. Footsteps in the hallway. Measured, deliberate. They stopped outside her room. She held her breath. Soft knock. Elena. Are you awake? She should pretend to be asleep. Should maintain the boundaries she'd just established. Instead, she said, yes. I just wanted to say. He paused. Thank you. For trying. For being brave enough to give me another chance. I won't waste it. You better not. She heard his quiet laugh through the door. Sleep well, Mrs. Cross. You too. His footsteps retreated. A door opened, closed. Silence settled over the penthouse. But this time the silence felt different. Less like separation, more like shared space. Less like a cage, more like a choice she was making one day at a time. Elena closed her eyes and whispered to the darkness. Don't make me regret this. No answer came. Just the city beyond her windows, indifferent and eternal. And the knowledge that somewhere down the hall, Damien was probably asking himself the same question. She fell asleep eventually, and dreamed of locked rooms and brass keys and the possibility that monsters could learn to be human if someone was brave enough to teach them. When she woke in the morning, she found a note slipped under her door. Asterisk, the file is yours to keep. Along with the key, the studio, and whatever else you need from me. Asterisk. Asterisk, I meant what I said. I'm trying. Failing sometimes. But trying. Asterisk. Thank you for letting me try. E. Elena held the note, read it 3 times, then tucked it into her jewelry box beside the brass key and the photograph of the solemn boy who'd learned that wanting meant taking. But maybe, she thought, he was learning something different now. Maybe they both were. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to build something real from the ruins of his manipulation. She dressed, made coffee, and prepared to face another day of trying to understand if love could exist between a beast and the woman he'd caged. The answer, she suspected, would take more than 11 months to discover. But for the first time since signing the contract, Elena felt something other than fury or resignation. She felt curious. And curiosity, she was learning, was its own kind of choice. Chapter 8. The Reckoning. Elena stood in the studio on the 10th floor, surrounded by blank canvases and the sharp smell of linseed oil. Morning light flooded through north-facing windows, turning the white walls into perfect reflectors. Damien had done this, cleared the space, ordered supplies, given her something that was entirely hers. She'd been painting for 3 hours, losing herself in color and movement, when her phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Cross. This is Detective Sarah Morrison, NYPD Financial Crimes Unit. I need to speak with you about your father's business partner, Marcus Webb. Elena's brush stilled mid-stroke. What about him? He's recanted his cooperation agreement. Claims he was coerced into confessing to embezzlement he didn't commit. The detective's voice was professionally neutral. He's naming Damien Cross as the one who actually orchestrated the theft. The canvas blurred. Elena set down her brush with careful precision. That's not possible. That's what we need to determine. Can you come to the precinct this afternoon? 3 o'clock. Yes, of course. The call ended. Elena stared at her half-finished painting. Abstract blues and grays that had felt cathartic an hour ago, now just looked chaotic. Marcus was lying. He had to be lying. But doubt crept in anyway, insidious and cold. What if Damien had orchestrated everything? What if the embezzlement, the crisis, the entire situation had been manufactured to force her hand? What if she'd been right to hate him and wrong to try again? Elena cleaned her brushes mechanically, locked the studio, and took the elevator back to the penthouse. She needed to see the files again, needed to verify what she thought she knew. The locked room was exactly as she'd left it. Empty walls, cleared desk, the folder of evidence sitting where she'd abandoned it. Elena spread the documents across the desk, studying bank statements and wire transfers with new eyes. The embezzlement had started 18 months ago. Long before Damien had approached her father. Long before he'd made his offer. The pattern was clear. Systematic theft, carefully hidden, designed to slowly drain Morgan Maritime's reserves. Unless Damien had planted the evidence. Unless he'd created the paper trail to support his narrative. Elena pressed her palms against the desk, tried to steady her breathing. She was spiraling, letting doubt poison the tentative trust she'd been building. But Marcus's accusation demanded investigation. Demanded honesty. She heard the elevator chime. Footsteps in the foyer. Then Damien's voice. "Elena? Are you here?" She emerged from the locked room, found him in the hallway. He'd loosened his tie and exhaustion lined his face. Another long day of board meetings and corporate warfare. "I need to ask you something," she said without preamble. "And I need you to be completely honest." Something shifted in his expression. Wariness or recognition. "Always. Did you orchestrate Marcus Webb's embezzlement?" The question hung between them, sharp and dangerous. Damien's face went carefully blank. "Why are you asking?" "Because Detective Morrison called. Because Marcus is recanting his confession. Because he's claiming you framed him." Elena forced herself to hold his gaze. "Did you?" "No." The word came flat, final. "Marcus Webb stole $12 million from your father's company. I exposed the theft. I didn't create it. Can you prove that?" "The financial forensics prove it. The bank records, the wire transfers, the offshore accounts. All of it traces back to Marcus." Damien moved closer, and she forced herself not to retreat. "Elena, I've done terrible things. Manipulated situations, controlled outcomes, engineered your captivity. But I didn't frame an innocent man." "Then why is he claiming you did?" "Because he's desperate. Because he's facing federal charges and prison time. Because blaming me gives him a defense strategy." Damien's voice remained level, controlled. "Call Detective Morrison back. Tell her I'll provide my attorney's complete file. Every piece of evidence we used to build the case. It will prove Marcus is lying." Elena studied his face, looking for tells, for the micro-expressions that would reveal deception. Found only exhaustion and something that looked like hurt. "I want to believe you," she said quietly. "But you don't. I don't know what to believe." Elena moved past him, into the living room. "Every time I start to trust you, something happens that makes me question everything. How am I supposed to build something real with you when I can't tell what's true?" Damien followed, maintained careful distance. "By letting me prove it. Come with me to the precinct. Sit in on the interview. Hear the evidence. Make your own judgment. You'd let me do that." "I'd insist on it." He pulled out his phone, typed something. "I'm texting Victoria. She'll arrange for our attorneys to meet us there with the complete file. You'll see everything, Elena. No more secrets. No more hidden evidence." The offer surprised her. Elena sank onto the sofa, suddenly exhausted. "What if the evidence doesn't prove what you think it does? Then you'll know the truth. And you'll make your choice accordingly." He sat beside her, not touching but close. "I meant what I said about honesty, even when it costs me. Even if it means losing you." Elena looked at him, saw the vulnerability beneath the corporate armor. "You're terrified right now." "Yes. Because you think I'll find out you're lying." Because I think you'll find out I'm telling the truth, and you still won't believe me. His voice dropped lower. Because I've destroyed your ability to trust me, and no amount of evidence will rebuild it. The raw admission made her chest ache. Elena reached for his hand, laced their fingers together. Then we'll start with evidence, and see where it leads. The precinct was exactly what Elena expected. Fluorescent lighting, institutional beige, the smell of bad coffee and bureaucracy. Detective Morrison met them in the lobby. Mid-40s, sharp-eyed, with the weary competence of someone who'd seen every con and lie. Mr. Cross. Mrs. Cross. Thank you for coming. She gestured toward an interview room. Your attorneys. On their way with the case files, Damien said. We're prepared to provide complete documentation. Morrison's eyebrow arched. Most people lawyer up and refuse to talk. I'm not most people. And I have nothing to hide. They sat in the interview room. Metal table, uncomfortable chairs, a mirror that was obviously one-way glass. Elena felt like she was in a crime drama, except this was her life, her marriage, her choice to trust or walk away. Victoria arrived 15 minutes later with 2 attorneys and a banker's box of files. She set it on the table with a decisive thunk. Complete financial forensics, she said. Bank records, wire transfers, offshore account documentation, email correspondence. Everything we used to build the embezzlement case against Marcus Webb. Detective Morrison opened the box, began sorting through documents. Elena watched her face, looking for reactions, for any sign that the evidence was questionable. This is thorough, Morrison said after 20 minutes. When did you start investigating? 18 months ago, Damien replied. I was considering an investment in Morgan Maritime. Standard due diligence revealed irregularities in their financial statements. I hired forensic accountants to investigate. And you discovered the embezzlement. We discovered systematic theft. It took 6 months to trace it definitively to Marcus Webb. Damien's voice remained level, professional. At that point, I contacted federal prosecutors. They asked me to keep the investigation quiet while they built their case. Why not tell Richard Morgan immediately? Because we needed to ensure Marcus didn't destroy evidence. Because federal prosecutors wanted a solid case before making arrests. Damien paused. And because I saw an opportunity to acquire something I wanted. Elena's breath caught. Morrison looked up sharply. Acquire what? His daughter. Damien met the detective's gaze steadily. I'd been aware of Elena for some time. When her father's company faced crisis, I saw an opportunity to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. An arranged marriage. Morrison's tone was carefully neutral. A contract marriage. 1 year, in exchange for the capital to save Morgan Maritime. Damien's hand found Elena's under the table, squeezed gently. I'm not proud of the manipulation. But I didn't create the embezzlement. I simply waited to reveal it until the timing served my purposes. The honesty was brutal, damning. Elena felt Morrison's gaze shift to her. Mrs. Cross. Did you know about any of this? Not until after I'd signed the contract. Elena's voice was steady despite the turmoil in her chest. My husband has been educating me about his methods. And you're staying in the marriage. I'm honoring the contract. What happens after is still undecided. Morrison studied them both, and Elena could see her processing the dynamics, the power imbalance, the manipulation, the complicated truth of their situation. Marcus Webb claims Mr. Cross planted evidence, Morrison said, that the offshore accounts were opened in his name but funded by Cross Capital. Then trace the funds. Victoria pulled out another file. Wire transfer records showing the money came from Morgan Maritime's accounts. Bank surveillance footage showing Marcus opening the offshore accounts in person. Email correspondence between Marcus and the offshore banks using his personal email address. She spread the documents across the table. If Damien planted this evidence, he's a criminal mastermind. Or Marcus is lying to avoid prison. Morrison examined each document carefully. Elena watched her face, saw the moment doubt shifted to certainty. "This is solid," Morrison admitted. "The forensics support your narrative, Mr. Cross. Because it's the truth." Damien's voice remained level. "I've done many questionable things, detective. But framing an innocent man isn't one of them." Morrison closed the file. Stood. "I'll need to verify some of this with the federal prosecutors. But preliminarily, it appears Marcus Webb's accusations are unfounded." She looked at Elena. "Mrs. Cross, do you need any assistance? Resources for domestic situations." The careful phrasing made Elena's chest tight. Morrison was offering her an exit, a way to leave if she needed it. "No, thank you. I'm here by choice." Choice is a flexible concept when power dynamics are involved. "I'm aware." Elena stood, met the detective's gaze. "But I'm also capable of making my own decisions. Even complicated ones." Morrison nodded slowly. "If that changes, my card is on file. Don't hesitate to reach out." They left the precinct in silence. The car ride back to Tribeca was tense, neither of them speaking until the elevator doors closed and they were alone. "You told her everything," Elena said. "About the manipulation. About waiting to reveal the embezzlement. About using the crisis to acquire me. I promised honesty. Even when it costs me." Damien leaned against the elevator wall, exhaustion evident. "Did it cost me your trust?" Elena considered the question. "You were honest about being manipulative. That's something. But not enough. I don't know yet." She watched the floor numbers tick upward. "The evidence proves Marcus is lying. That you didn't frame him. But it also proves you're exactly what I accused you of being. Someone who engineers situations to get what he wants." "Yes. Someone who waited 6 months to reveal a crime because the timing suited his purposes." "Yes. Someone who used my family's crisis as leverage to force my compliance." "Yes." His voice roughened. "I am all of those things, Elena. I've never pretended otherwise. The question is whether you can live with that. Whether the man I'm trying to become is worth the beast I've been." The elevator chimed. Penthouse level. The doors opened, but neither of them moved. "I don't know," Elena admitted. "I want to believe you're capable of change. That you can choose honesty over manipulation, vulnerability over control. But every time I start to trust you, I'm reminded of what you did. How you engineered my captivity. How you used my love for my family against me." "I know." Damien pushed away from the wall, but didn't step out of the elevator. "And I don't blame you for doubting me. For questioning everything. For wondering if I'm capable of being anything other than what I am. So what do we do?" Elena's voice cracked. "How do we build something real when the foundation is manipulation and coercion? We start over." He reached past her, pressed the button to hold the elevator. "Right now. In this moment. I ask you a question and you answer honestly. No contract, no obligations. Just truth." Elena's pulse hammered. "What question? Do you want to stay married to me?" His eyes held hers, and the vulnerability in them made her breath catch. "Not because of the contract. Not because of your family. Not because of the money or the consequences. Just, do you want to be here? With me?" The question hung between them, enormous and terrifying. Elena thought about the past 4 weeks. The fury and the thaw, the locked room and the studio, the blackout kiss and the separation agreement. She thought about the man who'd bought her and the man who was trying to earn her. Superimposed and inseparable. "I don't know," she whispered. "I'm still figuring out who you are. Who we are. Whether the beast can become a man, or if I'm a fool for believing it's possible. That's not an answer. It's the only answer I have." Elena stepped out of the elevator and he followed. "I'm not ready to say yes. But I'm not ready to say no either. I'm just trying. One day at a time. To see if we can build something real from the wreckage." Damien studied her face, and she saw the moment he accepted her answer. not satisfied but understanding. Then we try. One day at a time. Until you know. And if I decide to leave, then I let you go. Because that's what love means. Choosing their freedom over your fear. His hand cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheekbone. I love you, Elena. Imperfectly. Obsessively. In ways that probably aren't healthy. But real nonetheless. And if loving you means losing you, I'll survive it. Because you deserve the choice. Tears burned her eyes. You can't just say things like that. Why not? Because it makes me want to stay. Want to believe you. Want to trust that you're capable of being different. She leaned into his touch despite herself. And I'm terrified that's exactly what you want. To manipulate me into staying through vulnerability instead of control. Is it working? The question surprised a laugh from her. Maybe. I hate you for that. I know. He leaned down, pressed his forehead to hers. But you don't hate me enough to leave. So I'll take it. They stood like that for a long moment, breathing together, finding comfort in proximity, negotiating the impossible space between captor and captive, beast and man, love and obsession. Finally, Elena pulled back. I need to process. Today was a lot. Understood. Damien released her reluctantly. I have work to finish anyway. But Elena. She looked back. Thank you. For coming to the precinct. For hearing the evidence. For trying to understand instead of just assuming the worst. His voice dropped lower. For giving me another chance to prove I'm worth the risk. Elena didn't respond. She retreated to her room, closed the door, and stood in the darkness trying to process what she'd learned. Marcus was lying. Damien hadn't framed him. The embezzlement was real, and Damien had exposed it, even if he'd waited to reveal it until the timing served his purposes. He was exactly what he'd always claimed to be. Manipulative, controlling, willing to engineer situations to get what he wanted. But also honest about it. Honest about his methods, his motivations, his damage. Was that enough? Could she build a life with someone who admitted to being a beast, even as he tried to become a man? Elena didn't know. But she knew she wasn't ready to leave. Wasn't ready to give up on the possibility that love could exist between them. Damaged, dysfunctional, but real. She changed into comfortable clothes, then found herself drawn back to the locked room. The folder of evidence still sat on the desk, and she opened it again, studying the documents with new eyes. Beneath the financial forensics, she found something she'd missed before. A letter, handwritten, dated 6 months ago. Richard. Asterisk by the time you read this, you'll know about Marcus's theft. You'll know your company was being systematically drained, and you'll probably blame yourself for not seeing it sooner. Asterisk. Don't. Asterisk Marcus is a skilled manipulator. He spent years building your trust, positioning himself as indispensable. You had no reason to suspect him, asterisk. Asterisk I'm writing to tell you that your daughter had nothing to do with my decision to expose the embezzlement. I would have revealed Marcus's crimes regardless of whether Elena agreed to marry me. The federal case was already built. Your family was already protected. Asterisk. The marriage offer was separate, selfish, manipulative, designed to bind her to me because I was too damaged to risk asking and being refused. Asterisk she deserves better than what I've offered her. But I'm going to spend the next year trying to become someone worthy of her choice. Someone who earns her instead of just buying her. Asterisk. Asterisk if I fail, if she chooses to leave when the contract ends, promise me you'll support her decision. Don't let guilt or obligation keep her bound to a man who couldn't learn to be human. Asterisk. Damien Cross. Elena read the letter 3 times, hands shaking. He'd written this 6 months ago, before he'd made his offer, before she'd signed the contract. He'd already decided to protect her family regardless of her compliance. The marriage had been separate, selfish, but the protection had been unconditional. She heard footsteps in the hallway. Soft knock on the doorframe. Elena. Are you all right? She looked up, found Damien in the doorway. You wrote to my father. 6 months ago. Told him you'd protect us regardless of whether I married you. His expression shifted, surprise then resignation. You weren't supposed to find that. Why not? Because it undermines my leverage. Proves that the protection was never conditional on your compliance. He moved into the room, careful to maintain distance. I wanted you to believe you had no choice. That marrying me was the only way to save your family. Because I was terrified you'd refuse me if you knew the truth. You're an idiot. Elena stood, cross to him. You protected my family unconditionally, and then you manipulated me into believing I had no choice. That's insane. Controlling. Proof that I'm exactly what you've accused me of being. Damien's voice was rough. I know. I've always known. But I wanted you more than I wanted to be good. More than I wanted to do the right thing. And I'm still not sure I'm capable of being anything else. Elena studied his face. The exhaustion, the vulnerability, the terrible honesty of a man who'd spent 30 years refusing to need anyone. Show me, she said quietly. Show you what? That you're capable of being different. Of choosing my agency over your control. Of offering vulnerability without guarantees. She moved closer until she could feel his heat. Prove to me that the beast can become a man. His hands found her waist. Rested there without pulling her closer. How? Ask me. Elena's voice steadied. Ask me what I want. Not what the contract requires. Not what serves your purposes. Just what do I want, right now? In this moment. Damien's eyes searched hers, and she saw him wrestling with the question. The risk of asking, the terror of being refused. Finally he whispered. What do you want, Elena? You. The admission escaped before she could stop it. I want you. Not the idea of you. Not the version you're trying to become. Just you. Damage and desire and all the complicated truth of who you are. His breath caught. Even knowing what I've done. Especially knowing what you've done. Because it means I'm choosing you with full knowledge. With agency. With the understanding that you're both beast and man. And I want both. Elena's hands found his chest. Felt his heart hammering. So ask me again. Ask me what I want. What do you want? His voice was rough with need and hope and fear. I want you to kiss me. Touch me. Take me to bed and prove to me that this is real. She looked up at him, saw the vulnerability in his eyes. I want to stop fighting this and see what happens when we both choose it. Choose each other. Choose to build something from the wreckage. Elena. His voice broke on her name. Ask me, she whispered. One more time. Give me the choice. His hands tightened on her waist, and she felt him trembling. Will you come to bed with me? Not because of the contract. Not because of obligation. Just because you want to. Because you choose this. Choose me. Yes. The word came clear, certain. I choose you, Damien. Beast and man. Damage and desire. All of it. He kissed her then. Desperate, grateful, worshipful. Elena melted into him. Let herself feel without analyzing. Want without questioning. When he lifted her, she wrapped her legs around his waist. And he carried her down the hallway to the master suite. The room was dark, intimate. He set her down gently, and they undressed each other slowly. Reverent, exploratory, as if discovering each other for the first time. When they were both naked, he pulled her onto the bed, covered her body with his. Tell me if you want to stop, he murmured against her neck. Tell me if it's too much. Tell me. Stop asking permission and just love me. Elena pulled him closer, felt his arousal press against her. Show me you're capable of this. Of being vulnerable. Of wanting without controlling. He entered her slowly, carefully, watching her face for any sign of discomfort. Elena gasped at the fullness, the rightness of it, the way her body welcomed him despite everything. Okay. His voice was strained with the effort of restraint. Perfect. She arched into him and he groaned. Don't hold back, Damien. I want all of you. He moved then, deep, steady, building a rhythm that made her breath catch. Elena wrapped her legs around him, met him thrust for thrust, and felt the world narrow to just this. His body, his breath, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. When she came, it was with his name on her lips and tears on her face. Not from pain, but from the overwhelming rightness of choosing him, of being chosen, of building something real from the ruins of his manipulation. He followed her over the edge moments later, and they collapsed together, breathing hard, hearts hammering in sync. "I love you," he whispered against her hair. "I know you're not ready to say it back, but I love you. Completely. Terrifyingly. In ways I'm still learning to understand." Elena pressed her face against his chest, felt his heart steady beneath her cheek. "Ask me again in 11 months. When the contract ends. When I have real choice. And maybe then I'll be ready to answer. I'll wait." His arms tightened around her. "I'm very patient when I want something." Despite everything, Elena smiled. "You keep saying that. Because it's the truest thing I know." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "Thank you. For choosing me. For being brave enough to try. For teaching me what love looks like when it's real." Epilogue. 1 year later. The gallery hummed with opening night energy. Champagne flutes catching light, voices rising and falling in practiced appreciation, the particular electricity of Manhattan's art world gathering to judge and be judged. Elena stood before her largest canvas, watching strangers examine the abstract blues and grays that had once been catharsis, now transformed into something she could share. "It's extraordinary." A woman in Prada leaned closer to read the title card. The locked room star. "Is that literal or metaphorical?" "Both," Elena said, and felt Damien's hand find the small of her back. Light, proprietary, the touch so familiar now she barely registered it. The woman's eyes flicked to him, widened slightly in recognition. "Mr. Cross, I didn't realize you were married to the artist. For almost a year now." His voice carried that particular warmth he reserved for public performance, but his thumb traced small circles against Elena's spine, private communication beneath the veneer. "I'm her biggest patron. And her harshest critic." "Liar." Elena smiled despite herself. "He loves everything I paint. I love everything you do." The correction was gentle, honest, and the woman excused herself with practiced grace, leaving them alone in the crowd. Elena turned to face him properly. He'd worn the charcoal suit she loved, the one that made his eyes look almost black in certain light. 11 months of marriage had taught her to read the micro-expressions beneath his corporate armor, the tension around his eyes that meant long day, the slight curve of his mouth that meant genuine pleasure, the way his gaze tracked her movements that meant want. "You're staring," she murmured. "I'm appreciating." His hand slid to her waist. "You're beautiful tonight. Though you're always beautiful. I just don't tell you enough. You told me this morning. And yesterday. And the day before that. Then I'm making up for lost time." He leaned closer, voice dropping. "How much longer do we have to stay?" "It's my opening. At least another hour." "An hour." He pressed a kiss to her temple. "Then I'm taking you home and showing you exactly how proud I am." Heat curled low in her stomach. "Promises, promises. I always keep my promises. You should know that by now." She did. 11 months of him keeping his word. Honesty even when it cost him. Vulnerability even when it terrified him. Choosing her agency over his control even when every instinct screamed otherwise. He still failed sometimes, still defaulted to manipulation when stressed, still struggled with the concept of not controlling every variable. But he tried. Every day. And slowly, painfully, they'd built something real from the wreckage. Elena Morgan Cross. A journalist approached, recorder in hand. "Can I ask you a few questions about the exhibition?" Elena glanced at Damien, saw him nod and step back, giving her space, letting her have this moment without his presence overwhelming it. Progress, hard-won and genuine. The interview was brief, focused on her work rather than her marriage. When it ended, she found Damien across the gallery, deep in conversation with the curator. He looked up as she approached, and something in his expression made her breath catch. "What?" she asked when they were alone again. "Nothing. Just thinking about how far we've come." His hand found hers, laced their fingers together. "A year ago you hated me. I didn't hate you. I hated what you'd done. Is there a difference?" Elena smiled at the callback to their early arguments. "I'm still figuring that out." "Liar." He pulled her closer and she let him. "You know exactly what you feel. You're just afraid to say it." "Maybe." She looked up at him, saw the vulnerability beneath the confidence. "Or maybe I'm waiting for the right moment." "When's that?" "When the contract ends. When I have real choice. When I know if this is love or just Stockholm Syndrome with better lighting." "I remember." His thumb brushed across her knuckles. "That's tomorrow, by the way. The contract expires at midnight." Elena's pulse jumped. She'd been counting days, of course. Impossible not to, when every morning brought them closer to the moment when she'd have to choose. Stay or leave. Build a future or walk away with her settlement and never look back. "I know," she said quietly. "And?" His voice was carefully neutral, but she could feel the tension in his body, see the fear in his eyes. "Have you decided?" "Ask me tomorrow. When I'm actually free." "Elena." "Tomorrow, Damien." She squeezed his hand. "Let me have tonight. Let me enjoy my opening without that weight." He studied her face, and she watched him wrestle with the need to know, the terror of uncertainty. Finally he nodded. "Tomorrow. But I'm asking the moment the contract expires. I wouldn't expect anything less." They stayed another hour, circulating through the crowd, accepting congratulations and fielding questions. Elena sold 3 paintings, including the locked room, to collectors who promised to give them good homes. When they finally escaped into the November night, she was exhausted and exhilarated and terrified about what tomorrow would bring. The car ride home was quiet, both of them lost in thought. Damien's hand rested on her thigh, and she covered it with hers, felt his tension beneath her palm. "Whatever you decide," he said as they pulled up to the building, "I want you to know, this year has been the best of my life. Even the hard parts, even the fights, even the moments when I failed you. 'Cause it was real. And I've never had that before." Elena's throat tightened. "Damien, let me finish." He turned to face her, and the raw vulnerability in his eyes made her chest ache. "If you choose to leave tomorrow, I'll survive it. I'll hate it, and it will probably destroy me for a while, but I'll survive. Because you taught me that love means letting go. That possession isn't connection. That the only thing worth having is what's freely given. You're trying to manipulate me into staying." But her voice lacked conviction. "I'm trying to tell you the truth. That I love you. That I want you to stay. But that I'll respect whatever you choose." His hand cupped her face. "Because that's what you taught me. How to love without controlling. How to want without possessing. How to be human instead of just surviving." Elena leaned into his touch, felt tears prick her eyes. "You're making this very difficult." "Good. I'd hate for it to be easy." He pressed a kiss to her forehead. "Come on. Let's go home." The words settled over her, warm and complicated. The penthouse had become that over the past year. Not a cage, but a space they'd built together. Her studio in the locked room, her books on his shelves, her coffee preferences programmed into the machine. Small domesticities that added up to something that felt like belonging. They rode the elevator in silence, and Elena felt the weight of tomorrow pressing down. One more day. One more night. Then she'd have to choose. Inside the penthouse, Damien poured them wine while Elena kicked off her heels and collapsed onto the sofa. The city glittered beyond the windows, indifferent and eternal. "I have something for you," Damien said, setting down the wine glasses. "An early birthday present. My birthday's not for 3 months. Consider it a contract-ending present then." He retrieved a folder from his office, set it on the coffee table. Elena opened it with trembling hands. Inside, legal documents, dense with terminology she'd learned to recognize over the past year. She scanned the pages and her breath caught. You're dissolving Cross Capital, restructuring it into a foundation. He sat beside her, close but not touching. The Cross Foundation for Arts Education, funding programs for underprivileged kids, scholarships, studio space, everything I never had. Damien, you're listed as co-founder, equal decision-making power, equal control. His voice was steady, but she could hear the vulnerability beneath. If you stay, if you choose to build this with me, but if you leave, the foundation continues. Your name stays on it. You'll have input regardless. Elena stared at the documents, felt something crack open in her chest. You're giving me power over your life's work. I'm giving you partnership, real partnership, not the contract kind. He took her hand, held it gently. I spent 30 years building an empire based on control and possession. I want to spend the next 30 building something based on choice and creation. With you. If you'll have me. This is manipulation. But the accusation lacked heat. This is honesty and hope. And me trying to prove I'm capable of being someone worthy of your choice. He brought her hand to his lips, kissed her palm. But you're right, it's also manipulation. Because I want you to stay, and I'm willing to use every tool I have to convince you. Including vulnerability. Despite everything, Elena laughed. At least you're honest about it. Always. Even when it costs me. He set down her hand, stood. I'm going to give you space. Let you think without my presence influencing you. But Elena, whatever you decide, know that I love you. Imperfectly. Obsessively. But real nonetheless. He walked toward the master suite, and Elena called after him. Damien. He stopped, looked back. Hey, please. I don't want space. I want. She trailed off, searching for words. What do you want? The question he'd learned to ask. The one that gave her agency, choice, power. Elena stood, cross to him. I want you to take me to bed. Hold me. Be with me on this last night of the contract. She looked up at him, saw the hope and fear warring in his eyes. I want to fall asleep in your arms and wake up free. And then I want to make my choice with full knowledge of what I'm choosing. His hands found her waist, pulled her close. You already know what you're choosing. Maybe. But I want to be sure. I want to wake up tomorrow and know that what I feel is real. Not obligation. Not Stockholm Syndrome. Just. She pressed her hand to his chest, felt his heart hammering. Just love. If that's what this is. It is. He kissed her softly. At least on my end. I've never been more certain of anything. Then prove it. Elena pulled him toward the bedroom. Show me what love looks like when it's real. When it's chosen. When it's built from honesty instead of manipulation. They made love slowly, carefully, with the weight of tomorrow pressing down. Elena memorized the feel of him. His hands on her skin, his breath on her neck, the way he whispered her name like a prayer. When they finished, they lay tangled together, and she felt his heart steady beneath her cheek. I'm terrified, he admitted into the darkness. That you'll leave. That I'll have learned how to be human, and it won't be enough. That I'll lose you anyway. I'm terrified too. Elena pressed a kiss to his chest. That I'll stay and you'll revert. That the beast will consume the man. That I'll wake up one day and realize I've been a fool. Then we're both terrified. That seems appropriate. His arms tightened around her. Fear means it matters. Means we're risking something real. They fell asleep like that, and Elena dreamed of locked rooms and brass keys and the possibility that love could exist between a beast and the woman he'd caged, if they were both brave enough to choose it. She woke to gray November light and the smell of coffee. The bed beside her was empty, but she could hear movement in the kitchen, the clink of mugs, the mechanical whisper of the espresso machine. Elena checked her phone. 11:47 a.m. 13 minutes until the contract expired. 13 minutes until she had to choose. She found Damien in the kitchen, already dressed in jeans and a sweater. Casual, vulnerable, without his corporate armor. He looked up as she entered, and the fear in his eyes made her chest ache. "Coffee." His voice was carefully neutral. "Please." He poured, added cream exactly how she liked it, set the mug before her. They stood on opposite sides of the island, the space between them enormous and intimate. 11:48, Elena said, watching the clock on the stove. 12 minutes. "I'm aware." He gripped his own mug like a lifeline. "Elena, let me say this first." She set down her coffee with careful precision. "A year ago you bought me, engineered my captivity, made sure I had no choice but to sign a contract that bound me to you legally, financially, irrevocably." "Yes." His jaw tightened. "I did all of that. And then you spent a year trying to earn me instead of just own me. Trying to become someone worthy of my choice. Trying to prove that the beast could become a man." Elena moved around the island, closing the distance. "You failed sometimes. Defaulted to manipulation when you were scared. Struggled with giving me agency. But you tried. Every day. Even when it cost you. Even when it terrified you. Elena, I'm not finished." She stopped in front of him, close enough to feel his heat. "You gave me a studio. Funded my exhibition. Built a foundation in both our names. Dissolved your empire to create something based on partnership instead of possession. You learned to ask what I wanted instead of assuming. You learned to offer vulnerability instead of control. You learned to love me without trying to own me. Most of the time," he corrected quietly. "I still fail. I still manipulate. I still struggle with not controlling everything. I know. And I'm still figuring out if I can live with that. If the man you're becoming is worth the beast you've been." Elena looked up at him, saw the naked fear in his eyes. "But I'm also figuring out that people are complicated. That love is messy. That you can be both terrible and trying, both damaged and desperate to change." The clock on the stove read 11:58. 2 minutes, Damien said. "Elena, please. Ask me." She took his hands, held them between her own. "One more time. Give me the choice." His hands trembled in hers. "Will you stay? Not because of the contract. Not because of obligation. Just because you want to. Because you choose this. Choose me. Choose us." Elena looked at him. At the vulnerability in his dark eyes, the tension in his jaw, the way he was holding his breath waiting for her answer. She thought about the locked room and the brass key, the photographs and the files, the systematic invasion of her life that had brought her here. She thought about the books he'd bought, the studio he'd built, the honesty he'd offered even when it cost him everything. The way he'd learned to ask instead of take, to offer instead of demand, to love without possessing. She thought about the boy in the photograph, solemn, watchful, already learning that wanting meant losing, and the man he'd become. Both beast and human, superimposed and inseparable. The clock struck midnight. "Yes," Elena said, and watched relief flood his face. "I choose you. Choose us. I choose to stay and build something real from the wreckage. Not because I have to, but because I want to. Elena." His voice broke on her name. "I love you." The words came clear, certain, earned through 11 months of fury and thaw, distance and proximity, fear and hope. Imperfectly, messily, with full knowledge of what you're capable of. But real nonetheless. "I love you, Damien Cross. Beast and man. Damage and desire. All of it." He kissed her then. Desperate, grateful, worshipful. Elena melted into him. Felt his tears on her face, or maybe they were hers. Impossible to tell where one ended and the other began. When they finally pulled apart, both breathing hard, Damien cupped her face in his hands. "Thank you," he whispered, "for choosing me, for being brave enough to love me, for teaching me what it means to be human." Thank you for being worth the risk. Elena pressed her hand to his chest, felt his heart hammering. For trying, for failing, for trying again, for proving that love can exist even when it starts with manipulation and coercion. So we're doing this. Building a life together. No contract, no expiration date, just us. She smiled through her tears. Choosing each other. Every day. For as long as we both want to. I'll want to forever. His thumb brushed away her tears. Fair warning. Good. Because I'm not going anywhere. Elena pulled him closer, kissed him softly. You're stuck with me now. For better or worse. In sickness and health. For richer or. We're already rich. You're ruining the moment. Sorry. But he was smiling, genuine and unguarded. Continue. For richer or richer then. Till death do us part. Elena looked up at him. Saw the love and hope and vulnerability in his eyes. I choose you, Damien. Today. Tomorrow. For all the days after. I choose us. Then we're really doing this. He lifted her, spun her around. Building a life. Family. A future. Elena's breath caught. A family. If you want. He set her down gently, and she saw the question in his eyes. The HEIR clause expired at midnight. But if you wanted to have children, not because of a contract but because we both chose it, I'd like that. Someday. When we're ready. Someday, Elena agreed and felt something settle in her chest. Not obligation. Not coercion. Just possibility freely chosen. When we're both ready. When we've built something stable enough to bring a child into. Deal. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. God, I love you. I don't say it enough. I love you, Elena Cross. Thank you for staying. Thank you for choosing me. Thank you for teaching me what love looks like when it's real. They stood in the kitchen, holding each other, watching Manhattan wake beyond the windows. The penthouse that had been a cage had become a home. The contract that had bound them had dissolved into choice. The beast had learned to be a man, and the woman he'd bought had chosen to stay. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't conventional. It probably wasn't even entirely healthy. But it was real. And it was theirs. And that was enough. 6 months later, Elena stood in the locked room, now her studio, adding final touches to a new series. The walls were covered with canvases in progress, each one exploring themes of captivity and choice, possession and partnership, the complicated truth of love built from damage. She heard the elevator chime, then Damien's voice. Elena? Where are you? Studio. He appeared in the doorway, still in his suit from the Foundation's board meeting, and stopped when he saw the new painting. It was different from her earlier work, brighter, warmer, with threads of gold woven through the blues and grays. What's this one called? He asked, moving closer. Asterisk the choice star dot. Elena set down her brush, wiped her hands. What do you think? I think it's extraordinary. Like everything you create. He wrapped his arms around her from behind, rested his chin on her shoulder. How was your day? Productive. Yours. Long. But good. The Foundation approved 3 new scholarship programs. He pressed a kiss to her neck. We're changing lives, Elena. Building something that matters. We are. She leaned back against him, felt his warmth. Together. They stood like that for a long moment, watching the city beyond the windows. Then Elena turned in his arms, looked up at him. I have something to tell you. Something in her tone made him tense. What's wrong? Nothing's wrong. Everything's right. Almost too right. She took his hand, pressed it to her stomach. I'm pregnant. Damien froze. You're pregnant. About 8 weeks. I found out this morning. Elena watched emotions flicker across his face. Shock, joy, fear, hope. I know we said someday. I know we wanted to wait. But. He kissed her, silencing her doubts. When he pulled back, his eyes were wet. We're having a baby. His voice was rough with emotion. We're going to be parents. Are you happy? Elena searched his face. Or terrified? Both. Completely both. He pressed his forehead to hers. But mostly happy. Overwhelmingly, terrifyingly happy. Good. Because I'm terrified too. She laughed through her tears. What if we mess this up? What if I'm a terrible mother? What if you revert to controlling everything? What if? We'll figure it out. Together. One day at a time. His hand splayed across her stomach, protective and gentle. We'll make mistakes. We'll fail sometimes. But we'll try. We'll keep trying. To be good parents. Good partners. Good humans. That's all we can do. Elena covered his hand with hers. Try. And love each other. And hope it's enough. It will be. He kissed her softly. Because we chose this. Chose each other. Chose to build something real from the wreckage. And that choice, that's the foundation for everything else. They stood in the studio surrounded by paintings that told their story. Captivity and choice, beast and man, the complicated truth of love built from damage and desire. Outside, Manhattan glittered in the twilight, indifferent and eternal. But inside, in the room that had once held photographs of obsession, now held evidence of creation. Of two damaged people learning to be whole together. Of love that had started with manipulation but had become something real through honesty and choice and the courage to keep trying. Elena looked at the man who'd bought her, who'd caged her, who'd learned to love her without possessing her. She thought about the year behind them and the years ahead, full of possibility and fear and the messy, complicated truth of building a life together. I love you, she said, and felt the weight of those words. Not obligation. Not coercion. Just truth freely given. I love you too. Damien's hand remained on her stomach, on the future they were creating. Thank you for choosing me. For staying. For teaching me what it means to be human. Thank you for being worth the risk. Elena pulled him closer, kissed him deeply. For trying. For failing. For trying again. For proving that love can exist even when it starts in darkness. They stood together as night fell over Manhattan, two people who'd found each other through manipulation and stayed through choice. The contract had expired. The cage had opened. And Elena Cross, née Morgan, bought but not broken, caged but not conquered, had chosen to stay. Not because she had to, but because she wanted to. Because love, she'd learned, wasn't about perfect beginnings. It was about choosing to stay, choosing to try, choosing to build something real from whatever wreckage you started with. And that choice, made freely, made daily, made with full knowledge of the cost, was the most powerful thing of all. End.